glasses. And so let's make this our first choice instead of using plastic. We were, to make y'all just really think about it clearly, plastic is petroleum. It's poison. It is furthering the killing of the waters in the earth. And one thing that really surprised me to find out when I went to testify in Congress about the plastics and what's going on with it is that each and every one of us nowadays, globally, absorb 1 credit card's worth of plastic per week goes in our bodies and becomes us, or we become it. And then on top of that, about 1/3 of the emissions, the methane emissions, come from the landfills and what's happening with the plastics. That's not only going in our waterways and into the oceans, but as it slowly biodegrades, it puts out more methane than millions of cars do per day. So we really have to adjust ourselves away from plastic in as many ways as we can. This particular panel that we're bringing together today, or that Movement Rights, Joe Kay, and all of us have made decisions about talking about is various pathways to the water within the territories that we live in, the waters around the earth. And as I speak to you, I'm holding this water in my hand, and I really feel that the direction for this conversation is from the sacred relative here and what she wants us to visit about. But there are strategies that we can share with one another about how we're making some approaches and some differences, and even more so to listen to you at the end of this panel to discuss maybe some challenges that you might have, that some of these thoughts might spur, or something that you want to share within the framework of where you live and how it can be useful to all of us. So I think that each one of us will just say our names. Hopefully you kind of have an understanding of who we are and where we're from already. But this to me is the linchpin of what Wounded Knee and the strategy and the warriorship and the actual ways that those strategies began. They were all campfire strategies then. We drive over to Pawnee, where our children were born in the hospital over there, in a little brick hospital, stone hospital that had Indian Health Service, was made up of Army medics that were practicing being medics on us, And right down the road from that was where a huge encampment lasted for months of AIM people came together, and many of us scattered out from there. Huge encampment lasted for months of AIM people came together, and many of us scattered out. Actually have water rights established within the state of Oklahoma's context of what water rights are and how they can be used. However, the rest of us, the 39 tribes here, also have invested in our traditional knowledges of how to bring into our sovereignty the best way to deal with the strategy at this moment. And I'm going to ask Jimbo Simmons, if he would mind opening this conversation about the very real issues that have been happening in southern Oklahoma, which could be our next meeting, next equinox. And what all has gone on down there. And in very recent history, his tribe has taken on the state of Oklahoma and the state of Texas.
Well, I've only been in that area for the last 5 years and moving back to Oklahoma. But one of the issues that kind of spurred me was the water. And it even kind of got more when I met, or when we were talking the last time in the water conference, how to get more involved in that issue. So when we started talking about movement rights, I said, well, and then they started talking about their agenda about the rights of Mother Earth. And of course, and also the conversation led to natural rights. And I believe that that's where I also began to kind of re-educate myself about how did this water become the possession of the state of Oklahoma? You know, what, and how my tribe relates to that. And of course, I'm one of those probably 39 tribes when you look at Choctaws, because we were relocated here. And so when you look at that relocation, so there was already people here. And so I began to kind of track back a little bit on what is the legal status of our tribes here. And then of course, most of you have heard about the McGirt decision, where I basically say the jurisdictional or sovereignty issue of the Indian territory was never what they call extinguished. So I believe that the court upheld that. So to me, the McGirt decision was one way of saying that, well, we as the original peoples of this area could stand on our rights too, as natural rights, as rights of nature. But where does that derive coming from? Where does we need to do with that? And I began to look at more like what we call grassroots communities, where common people, every day of us, where the experience and where the stories of why the water is important to us. For some, we might not understand it at this point, but as I mentioned earlier, there's a new level coming, a new ward coming, and that's the water wards. So I believe strongly that we're in a time when we really need to develop some basic common strategies with one another as tribes, sovereign nations. And I hate to say tribes sometimes, because when I refer to those tribes, it's like, you know, we're kind of, but no, we're nations, just as important as other nations that are kind of recognized as the dominant society. So that's how I look at our people today. We're nations. And it was only recently that our governments have changed. And many of that was through what we call the Indian Reorganization Act, which was in the 1930s. So this kind of governments are just what RA governments are really not new to our traditional forms of government, or governments that our ancestors were. And I believe today that understanding is quite apparent. It's still here, it's still amongst us. And all we have to do is go back to our elders and our traditional people, our treaty makers, things like that, in order to develop a good strategy. For me, I began to look at the history of the Choctaws, and it led me to even a more history of Oklahoma, and how Oklahoma became a state, and how Oklahoma is setting today. Some of you, maybe you're not familiar, but before Oklahoma became a state, there was what they called the Sequoia Convention. The Sequoia Convention was a gathering of all the tribes, nations in Oklahoma around 1905, 1906. And they got together and they developed their own constitution and bylaws. And it was around that time, and I believe it was Roosevelt, where particularly the Choctaws, but also some of the other tribes, nations, were promised when they were relocated to Oklahoma that they could have their own sovereign nation. And in some treaties, it is spelled out to be that. And so I believe that when the McGirt decision became apparent, or became public and became what the Supreme Court law, I believe that many of our nations now are still sovereign in that way. And to me, I believe that water is probably one of the ways for us to rally together. And for me, being a Choctaw, just recently, there's the Kiamichi River. The Kiamichi River starts in the eastern part of Cherokee country. And then it comes across 178 miles all the way through southeast Oklahoma. And it empties into the Red River. Well, they wanted to build a hydroelectric back pump station. That means that they want to build a huge reservoir. And this particular reservoir that they want to build is 5 miles, at least less than 5 miles from where I currently live by the Kiamichi River, and Nancy and I. And we found out now that they wanted to build this hydraulic. And so we decided to talk to some of the tribal members, which was our district chairman, and then also eventually we went to a couple of the meetings that were taking place amongst non-native people. Some of them were, Choctaws. And of course, the same with Choctaws nowadays. I can understand when Joe King talks about when people say charity, the color, the lightness. And I believe that that's kind of also, this is the kind of setting that meeting was. We wasn't for sure we were in a right. But what brought us together was the issue of the water. And I think that's what's going to help us today, is we need to find out how to build a network amongst all of our water allies. From one left, right, center, whatever you want to call them. And then I do believe that when we say that water is life, that's going to be the next battle, and we need to develop some good strategies for that. We beat this, it was a Texas company that wanted to come up here and build this, what they call hydraulic pump back system. Like I was going to say, they want to put a reservoir on top of the Kiamichi or on Tuskahoma Mountains, and they want to run that water up the mountains. And the way they run that water up the mountains is through a pipeline. And it runs up and it's stored up on top. And then at some point, when the electricity, the grid gets so low that they can't pump no more electricity, if you're ever down in southeastern Oklahoma, you'll see these, I counted at least 23 windmill pumps. When they built those windmill pumps onto Choctaw territory, and at the time the Choctaws probably didn't understand the technology, or maybe the eyesore, I call it, that it is, because you'll see the 27 of them that are up there. And again, it's not, that don't benefit the Choctaws, and it don't benefit Oklahoma. It all goes to Texas. So now they want to come to this pump back system. Once they get this pump back system, and when the electric grid gets so low, and in Texas, they want to send this electricity. So what they'll do is run that water from that reservoir, and it runs these generators, and it sends electricity to these windmills through a transmission line. And so it all goes to Texas. Well, for me, as a Choctaw, and I'm one of those Choctaws that have to carry a CDIB, you know, because I think that's part of our sovereignty, is that, but that goes back to, well, our traditional people didn't have to carry a card and so forth, but, you know, to me, that's just part of a direction that many of our people have chosen. And that's how I see the American Indian movement has been. It gave us, our people, a direction. And this strategy and this work that we're involved today evolves out of all of that. And to me, that's all part of the direction. And I'm here to help show my support for the protection of that water. How, you know, we need to go back, re-educate ourselves. Being a Choctaw and understanding the history of the 5 paralyzed tribes is what I heard. And the trail of, I call it the trail of death and tears, because our people did much more crying on that. There was a lot of death there. So how are we going to compensate? I don't even need to say compensate. How are we going to recognize, and how are we going to do that? Well, you know the history of the Choctaw. You got a Mississippi band, and you got an Oklahoma band. I would like to see them at one point unify themselves, just maybe like you do with the Cherokees. And so for me, the reason I wear patches that say the longest walk, because I believe that my journey has been the longest walk. My ancestors was on the longest walk, Trail of Tears. And in 1978, I was one of those individuals that stood up and made the longest walk across the country. And we had a second walk. And since then, there was many walks and many runs through Indian country against domestic violence, against drug abuse, for Leonard Peltier. A lot of this has been a part of our strategy, but we didn't see it at the time. Now we can kind of come together somewhere and say, well, what's going to be our strategy? Well, my vision at one point for myself is I hope to even see the Choctaws from Oklahoma go back to Mississippi in a walk. And then maybe in a few years they can retrace that. But to me, what's important is the prayer where all of our ancestors died along the way, you know. And I believe that in our work, that's how we come to an understanding of listening. For us, it's called listening to the waters. And I believe that that's, we might not understand it in that sense, but I believe that's my personal mission. And I've been involved in the American Indian movement, like I said earlier, and I've been involved in a lot of international work, and I've always wondered, why was I picked to do this? But a lot of those leaders that I was able to align myself with and travel with and walk with, you know, and most of them were gone, even Carter, you know. But those guys taught me something too. They taught me about liberation. That's what it's about. It's about liberation. You know, liberation is what our ancestors were fighting for, to liberate them from a value system that's been imposed on them. And that's what our people, we have our own values. We have our own philosophy and our own way of life, but it's not recognized. And so today we have to figure out, how do we make our strategy strong? And ceremony is our resistance. And we just have to continue to do those stairs. I was very moved when I seen those young ladies there, and my sister here, Casey, and how she conducted the ceremony. And then, like I say, I live it by symbolism in some sense, you know. When I left here after boarding school and in the military and ended up in prison, I know nothing about Choctaw, but I always have to say I'm a sun dancer, but it was the Lakota people that brought me back to understanding that we all have a way, we all have something, and that's what we have to get back to. And that's why I find myself back here in Oklahoma. because I remember a conversation I had with Carter in 2007 in South Dakota when they had that gathering of nations there. He said, when you coming back to Oklahoma? And I've always heard that from my sisters and at some point, you know, and I'm just here to help out and do what I can and respect for each and every one of you. So that's all I really want to say.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Dick. I've been listening to Jimbo and Nancy talk about the coalition building down in southern Oklahoma, that it was comprised of these unlikely alliances, kind of like with us and Nebraska, the Corn and the Cowboy and Indian Alliance that we had to form up there. That was ours. And yet, they were the caretakers of it at that time. We had to compromise and stand with them to keep Keystone XL from coming through at that time, through the Oglala Aquifer. Nikasi, my son, was part of the corn planting up there. He right now is at the University of Arizona, that he's speaking to the indigenous law students there on Monday about water in particular, and all of the various strategies that we're going to have to work on in order to get there. From what I was listening to Nancy, we were visiting about this issue with the Kaimachi that you talked about, that you had alliances with those unlikely people that, I hate to say this bad word, but Trumpsters. I ordinarily don't curse in public. But they do are beginning to make that understanding of what the value, the intrinsic value of water. And so those alliances had to happen. And also I'm hearing you talk about listening to the water, which has been something we speak about here. You know, maybe if you're looking at it from a Western concept, you hear them say babbling brook, you know, those kind of poetic ways. But for us, often, it is that we intake that knowledge, not only from birth, but with every drink of water, with every prayer of water. And everybody has water in their ceremonies. It does not matter what nation you come from. It's in your ceremonies. And when that comes inside you, those feelings that you get, that's listening to the water. When the Thunder Nation comes over and gives you those sounds and those feelings. And I was thinking of you all from California when you got here and those tornadoes were going. They have their ways. They have their ways. And it is about respect of those ways that we have to all come to, you know. The waves that maybe they were coming down in ice, and we were having a water ceremony, strangely enough, under a bridge in Paris during the UN conference, because that's where the water brought us, was right along that river right there. And we asked the indigenous women from around the globe to offer their songs from their people. And one that stands out to me, Faith Gemmel singing the songs to the whales. I could go through a lot, but one really struck me because I didn't understand fully the power there. Do you guys have ice clams still left?
My mother was ice clam. Her name was Eva. Eva White Coat. Her name was Mastady.
Oh, okay. Well, the only one still, because they try to divide our people, the Ponca, as well, and call one northern, one southern. We're one. But the last of us was the Stansblacks that were ice clad. And anyway, we were all under this bridge, and these ones I wouldn't have even considered indigenous, these Sami. I had just learned about the reindeer herders that were blonde and pale and all of that. Again, I was falling into stereotypes. And they came together. I'm literally getting chills again thinking about it. They sang a song of ice. And their song tinkled and it cracked. And it gave that you could see, feel, hear the water that they listened to and the ice up there. And it was so profound to me to think, how do we listen to water? And that's why we're doing these 4. And I'm going to go all the way around over here, if that's okay, Doctor, and go to, pardon? Okay, okay, Doctor. To Shannon. We met many years ago. And around water, I happened to be in the bathroom. I was washing my hand, guys, that's all. Water was flowing. We've been talking about 100 women from around the globe were brought together to talk about issues, and Shannon brought up rights of nature, and my head said, oh gosh, let's build another law around indigenous beliefs, please. So I was automatically turned off, you know. And because I remember our brother Carter telling me one time, sis, if we had freedom of religion, why'd they have to make a law for it? Why is there a law for freedom of religion? So when I heard about, you know, this, it was an immediate wall that I put up. Shannon helped me to dissolve that wall and to really look through it, to be able to say, if there is rights of nature and laws that we can incorporate from an indigenous perspective within our sovereign territories, and not just through the Western concept of laws, how would that work? Just the question began to blossom when we first met. And so I'm going to pass this all the way down to Shannon and maybe give a little bit of background. Shannon Biggs is the co-founder of Movement Rights, and that came after. I'm not real certain who you were with at that time. It's not really all that important because it was about all the women coming together to discuss the future. Shannon, please.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, everyone. I'm honored to be here in celebration of listening to the water. My name is Shannon, which I was named after a river in Ireland, where my people are from. And I'm wearing this necklace to remember Kiniraungi Kohu Morgan. Many of you know, who passed away a few months ago, who gave me this necklace when Casey and I were leading with many others an indigenous delegation from Turtle Island to Aotearoa, New Zealand, to learn about and to have a sharing of ideas about the rights of nature, what they called legal personality, and the Maori had recently won this amazing victory from the government to recognize the rights of the Wanganui River. It's the first river in the world to be recognized as a legal person. And for them, that is, like for all of us, that's their ancestor. The river, the water, that is their ancestor. The Wanganui Iwi, or tribe, says, I'm the river and the river is me, from the mountain to the sea, and everything around that. is part of that being. And for them, as long as the government considered the Wanganui River as property, their entire culture was enslaved.
Oh, yeah.
Their people were enslaved. And only through the liberation of the water could they begin to heal and to begin to reimagine their responsibility to the water, how to protect the water, how to take it away from the framework of that it's currently in, regulatory law and all this stuff, and all these layers of corporate and other ownership of the water, and the conversation of, rights of nature itself, the word rights came up, and comes up quite a bit, especially when we're talking with indigenous communities who say it's about responsibility. It's not, it's not just about rights. And that's absolutely right. I think that when we talk about rights of nature, it's the flip side in some ways of that coin. It's like the Universal Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People is set out to recognize what the responsibilities are for everybody to indigenous peoples, and for water to recognize the rights of nature. It may not be my favorite word, rights. It is a Western legal term that we've all gotten pretty used to, but it's a pathway to get us to where we really want to go, which is the liberation of the water and the sense of responsibility of us taking responsibility for the protection of that water. And rights of nature is one way that people around the world, mostly, surprise, indigenous-led, the Wanganui River and the Iwi there in Ecuador, when they recognize rights of nature, 52% of their people are indigenous. It's not a coincidence that they were able to open their minds to recognizing that in their constitution and to actually use that law to protect waterways based on an indigenous understanding of water and its wholeness. And that includes human populations. It includes all the animals, all the flora and the fauna, everything the water feeds, touches, that is part of that community. We are part of that community. And rights of nature in the United States, on Turtle Island, in the early days, a lot of communities, non-indigenous communities, passed rights of nature laws. And we were there, I was there, saying this is great, but there was this idea that it was a trick of law, that somehow once you passed the law you could sit down again, like the work was done. You recognize rights of nature. You recognize the rights of the nature of the ecosystem to exist, persist, and regenerate its vital cycles. You pass the law and you sit down. That is not what we're talking about. And so where I worked before, when Penny Opal-Plant and I and Casey really co-founded Movement Rights, it was to say this needs to be indigenous-led. This work needs to be part of indigenous-led strategies for the protection of Mother Earth. It's one strategy. It's not the only strategy. As Jimbo was talking, there are lots of other strategies, especially, but really when you're talking about not just changing a law, but shifting culture, that's the work, as I see it, that we have before us, and especially in following, as a non-indigenous person, following indigenous leadership is also bringing me back to a place where I can heal my relationship with the water, with the land. I think that that's part of the healing and the process of decolonization that we're all in. rights of nature and rights of the rivers is part of that. So when Casey said, you know, at the beginning, she was like, who needs another law? And I was like, you're absolutely right. But what if it was more than that? What if the law was just a little bit of the tool, and that what we were really doing was shifting entire cultures away from the enslavement of water and Mother Earth to the liberation that we were a part of, as opposed to owners of. You know, property law says humans are owners of Mother Earth. And, you know, you can say that as many times as you like, but if human law isn't in alignment with natural law, it's not worth the paper that it's written on. So this work really is about that culture shift. And that work is being done mostly by indigenous peoples around the world. There are now, since 2007, over 225 nations that have recognized the rights of nature, the rights of rivers. Some of the language may be a little different depending on where they're from, personhood. But this is an indigenous cosmology recognized in a Western legal framework that isn't really meant to just change the law. It's meant to change hearts, it's meant to change minds, it's meant to bring us all together as part of a healing of coming together. And so the convening of the four winds is part of the story of listening to the water. Casey led the Ponca, was part of leading the Ponca Nation to become the first to recognize the rights of nature at a tribal level, and to recognize the rights of the climate, to be clean and free, to recognize the rights of the river, the Arkansas, Nisga'a, Nishude, that they have their own life, and that we need to have responsibility. And those rivers that flow all the way through the state of Oklahoma and beyond, that connect all of us. I'm from California, but I'm connected. I'm still connected here, but certainly by my heart. That when we have this, panel of Wounded Knee veterans about coming together in power for liberation and for the liberation of Mother Earth, that recognizing the rights of nature, which Casey can talk about, and Dr. Crystal Cavalier can talk about her work with the Haw River, and many other tribes that have recognized the rights of nature in the last 10 years on Turtle Island in Canada, and many, many tribes here in what's called the United States that have begun that work. It isn't just about changing the law. It's about changing how we exist and protect Mother Earth, and it's one strategy. And I think, as Casey would say, the convenings of the four winds, which started with the first one in Ponca at the autumn equinox last year, and when we initially envisioned that, along with Joe Kay, Joy Braun, and others who were part of that conversation, there should be four, and they should be in different, recognizing the different directions of Oklahoma and bringing people together around water strategies. The tribes as a community to come together, to take the lessons of Wounded Knee, to take the lessons of Standing Rock and other places. How can we come together to protect the water? Because we may not agree on many, on everything. We may not agree on the role of fossil fuels. We may not agree on lots of stuff, but we can all agree that water is sacred and water is life, and that we can come together for water. So this second gathering, Joe Kay, I want to thank you for opening up the space. Movement Rights is honored to support these convenings, but we don't know exactly where the next one's going to be, do we? Honored to. I think You think you hear it on the river? Because each one, we trust that the next one is going to actually open the door for the next one, and that this conversation continues on in that way. And that rights of nature is part of that, but it's only one way the water speaks to us.
All right. There's so much always contained in everyone's speak, but I do want you all to hear loudly two things. One, that she says recognize. Fully understanding that the natural law is in full existence. And we get to participate as best we can, with the best understanding we can. The natural law is in place. You know, judging by how climate change has affected our Mother Earth and how our Mother Earth is in the process of purification through storms, through fires,
Yes.
through floods,
Yes.
through droughts, through wind,
Yes.
through all of the natural ways. She's doing her best. It
Yes.
is what you said about us aligning ourselves. The second thing my daughter just whispered in my ear, I sent her for some paperwork that I have, is, Mom, how do we expand? Most of us know each other. Most of us are part of each other's work in various ways. How are we going to expand this so that the ears that are listening to water and acting on behalf of the generations to come, how do we expand that? That's got to be fully thought out. As far as the, I think that we may be going south into Choctaw territory for the next equinox. That hasn't been fully discussed. That is one possibility. We did get an invitation from the Caddo to go into western Oklahoma. One of my fellow, you know that boy that plays my grandson in Reservation Dogs? Well, his mama, well, I just call him grandson. His mom is the vice chair of the Caddo. And so when she heard about this, she started saying, we need to bring that over to western Oklahoma. So we're looking at not this next convening, but the following convening, being in Cheese Land. Many of those guys meant lots of stuff is going on there, but they're doing their part in understanding. Thank you. I brought some resolutions that we did about rights of rivers that I can share with you guys in a minute. But I do want to go here, and Crystal has asked me not to call her doctor, but I just really want to tell you how proud we are as a people. Anytime one of our people steps through and shows them, this is how you do it. You can call me doctor. You know, we're very proud grandparents of Julie's oldest son, who will get his doctorate and become a doctor on May 11th. And believe me, he's going to be called Dr. Debbie. We're real proud of that. So, you know, we'd be glad to honor whatever name that you choose for us to say, but we say that with a great deal of pride. And, you know, we appreciate you being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So I'm really honored to be here, and just, oh my gosh, I'm saying this like she's so quick.
Cheese.
You know, speaking about rights of nature, I had heard this term about 6 years ago. I was on our tribal council as an elected tribal councilwoman. That was my goal, was to become an elected tribal councilwoman after I moved back home. I worked for the federal government in DC, total different view. I'm enrolled in the state tribe in North Carolina, and our people, they really lost their way, but they had to hide who they were. We had these horrible laws called bastardization laws where they would take the children of Indian women and men and put them in white families. And they just really lost their connection to the land and who they were. And so for about 200 years, our people hid out who they were. The census people changed our race. And then we had this thing called eugenics in the Racial Reclassification Act of 1924, to where it either classified you as either black or white. So our people really have lost their way, they lost their language and their culture, but they kind of talked about who they were, but they just said, you can't talk about it in public. You just have to be quiet. And so when I was born in 1978, they kept most of the civil rights really quiet. Even though civil rights was happening in Greensboro and all around us, our tribal community just kept quiet. The biggest thing that we had happen was there was a cross that was burned in our yards, and that was really to intimidate us, to not speak out and not to encourage people to be just bold. And so I guess you can say when I was born, that was just not it for me. I was always bugging my mom and grandparents, asking them questions, and they would always be like, don't do that. But I really couldn't say who I was until I went to college. And that's where I was able to learn our history of our people and why we were so depressed and why our families were just in disarray. And then I moved across the world with the military with my ex-husband, seeing different tribes. We were stationed in Kansas. We didn't learn about the history of the West. All we heard was the Trail of Tears, and that was it. Either you were the lost colony from the Pilgrims, or you were Cherokee. You went on the Trail of Tears, and that was it. They talked about, they wiped everybody else out. And that really devastates you as a person. But we were able to bring some culture back, but not really. Our people were just doing the motions. And when I moved home, and I was like, I have to do something for my children. I don't want them to fall into gangs, or, I want them to thrive and prosper. And during this time, I had met my current husband, Jason, and we created a stickball, teaching him how to play stickball, because that was one of our games. It was 2 sticks. And during that time, the Mountain Valley Pipeline was coming through, and it was called Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate Extension. And I was focused on, it was just going to destroy our water. Like, it was 5 miles from where I lived. And it was it could, leak into the Haw River. And the Haw River has been just a point for us because our tribe lived 5 miles from it. Most of our people worked in the factories that they put on the river. They also, that was just our livelihood. My grandmother worked at the Haw River Elementary School. And I remember every summer we would go and have picnics, but because of the dye mills and the textiles, like every 5 miles on the river, we couldn't get in it. We couldn't fish and eat the fish from the river. It was just really poisonous. And she said, if you ever get in the water, you have to go home and wash yourself because this poison will kill you. Mm-hmm. And so that was always in my mind, and I'm like, ooh, I don't want to get in this dark water. But it was still calling to me. And when the MVP was coming through, I was like, we got to do something. Well, my tribe did not want me to speak out. They were like, well, you're an elected person, you can't speak. And so my husband spoke on behalf and said, by the way, he mentioned, he was like, my wife is on the tribal council in the news. I had a field day with it, and so it became, Crystal Cavalier said, this is how the Okanagan people feel. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to resign. Because they were like, you can't speak on behalf of the tribe. I was like, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. So I did resign because I felt it was better for me to advocate for the community, because none of our tribal council lived where we lived. They didn't live 5 miles from where it was going to affect our drinking water. And I was, for the life of me, I was like, how can you not understand that this is poison and it's going to eventually kill us? And so there was a lot of issues happening that had been swept under the rug. Like, we had women who went missing or murdered, and nobody knew what was happening. They didn't even know it was a problem until I'm like, why are we not classifying this? We had no data. The state just didn't keep any statistics on us. And I'm just like, this is horrible. And for about 5 years, people thought I was a thorn in the side, because if it was environmental, Jason and I were there speaking about it. Like, you have to keep talking about it. If it was racism, we kept talking about it. But when it came to the water, I was like, this water needs to heal. But there were coalitions that were working for the water, but they were just skirting the top. They would have these festivals and they would refer to indigenous people as extinct. And I just was like, I can't take this no more. If you say this one more time, you're gonna really see an Indian come out. And so they put me on their board. And so I sat on their board and I was like, you guys cannot be having these culture days and having people dress up. That's offensive. And so once we started to explain that and get them on board to fight the pipeline, it just kind of picked up. Jason and I formed a nonprofit called 7 Directions of Service, because we felt it was a lot easier to fight a pipeline as an organization than as Crystal and Jason, because we wanted to grow this movement. And so what we found out was they had been fighting this pipeline for 10 years before we joined it. And we couldn't understand for the life of us why it was not being mentioned. They mentioned the ACP and DAPL, but they never mentioned the MVP. And I was like, that is a strategy that needs to be in the news. And we met through Mary Crow, Misty Crow. We met Dallas and Tom Goldtooth, and they invited us to come speak. And Jason and I went up there, and he'll tell you, I do not like to sing in public. I don't have a good voice. But they asked us for a song, and Jason and I got up, and we sang the Mother Earth honoring song. And we were able to, from that point, April 1st, get the MVP in the mouth of people to speak it, to say this pipeline was coming through, and it was going to harm Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina. Also, our burial mounds were being attacked. And so we raised all of these issues, and especially about the water, because they were going to bore under the Roanoke River in Virginia that runs into North Carolina, that runs into the Atlantic, as well as they were going to run adjacent to the Haw River, which flows into the Cape Fear, which flows into the Atlantic. So most of all of our rivers flow into our ocean. And before the Army Corps of Engineers came and dammed everything up, our fish would swim upstream sturgeon, but they can't do that anymore. Another point, our people have been disconnected from the water and the land that they live on. And so people would just say, Crystal, we need you to come and speak out. So Jason and I, we would come and speak out. I got a job offer working at Native Organizers Alliance, and we did the Red Road to DC, and I was able to see many different indigenous cultures across Turtle Island. We took this totem pole from Lummi Nation all the way to the Nez Perce, the Nimiku, straight down to Bears Ears, up through Chocolate Canyon. We went back up to the Black Hills, across to Standing Rock. Then we went to Line 3, Line 5, and then we went to DC. And that's where we gifted the totem pole to the Biden administration, so he wouldn't forget that he had made a promise to us when he campaigned. Then he's been steadily breaking his promises. Which brings us back to the rights of nature. That's where I heard it again for the second time. A Spotted Eagle had she had a workshop on the Missouri River. And at that river, at that point, I felt a deep connection. And I was like, it's something here at this river. So what I found out was our people migrated from that area in South Dakota. So like 3,000 years ago, they migrated through the Ohio Valley to Virginia, and then we ultimately ended up in North Carolina around the 1700s. And this is like our migration story. And I've been able to connect to so many people, especially Lower Sioux. Is that in Jason? Where's that? Minnesota. Lower Sioux. The one in Minnesota. Is that it, Jason?
Yeah, Dakota.
Yeah, Dakota. It's where Dallas Goldtooth family is from. And again, I felt the connection to the land. And I kept wondering, like, what does this mean for me as a person? And it meant that our people have been sleeping on the East Coast, and it's time for them to wake up. And when we came back, we started to hold these workshops about the rights of nature. And I had heard Casey and Penny and Shannon speak about the rights, and every time movement rights would come out, I'd be like, oh, I gotta go to this webinar. I have to hear the latest thing about the rights of nature. And we started to hold these issues in these classes in North Carolina. And we started to grow a movement, and it's been growing really slow. But now we have awakened our indigenous people from different tribes in North Carolina, but also in Virginia. Because as you see, most of our people, they were assimilated, pasteurized, whatever you call it, right? We were just almost wiped out, right? And we had to point together that's what they did to us, they pasteurized us, to like forget who we were. And we have to, and that's what I've been telling you, thank you, that you have to remember your connection to the land, whether it is your seeds, your seed work. Just put your hands in this and listen. Because if you don't slow down and listen to the land or to the water, especially to the water, what it's telling you, you're gonna miss it. And so we've kind of taken on people, and people see the value that we're bringing, and they've trusted the leadership that we've built. And it's very slow because the people over the age of 65, my mom's age, they are scared to death to speak out because of the Jim Crow laws that are still there today. They just may look a little different, but they're still there.
That's right.
And so we have created this movement, and we actually introduced in North Carolina, so we've been doing this for 2 years. We went to the State House and we lobbied one of our representatives, and see, for the state, since we're a state tribe, we have to go by the state's laws, right? They don't look at us as being sovereign, even though we have our own rights and we have our own ways and laws. They still look at us as they just pat us on the head.
Right.
And I have to tell you, you have to take a different mentality, because you can't have another government telling you what sovereign is. You have to make that up in your hearts and minds. And so trying to enroll the elders has been slow, but they're really seeing this process that we're creating, and we're creating it with the youth, because it does start with the children. My children see it. Casey was talking about, we have to remove these plastics. Our family it's been very difficult, but we've taken a 30-day challenge of removing plastics from our life. We drink out of glass bottles, and I'm gonna tell you what, try to find a glass bottle, especially in the state of North Carolina, is difficult. There's one bottle of water that we can drink. It's Mineral Springs, it's green. And we have to go to the very high-end stores to get this water. But it's very important because I don't like those microplastics in my body. The same thing with milk. To try to find a milk producer that puts it in glass, you have to travel great distances. And then we're trying to phase it out because milk makes us fluid. So we're learning these things and reclaiming the foods that need the water. And so we lobbied Pricey Harrison. We had to speak to her 3 times about what does the rights of nature mean, especially responsibilities. And she wrote back and was like, is this something green? And we told her, no, this is the rights of nature. This is what it means. It means this river is sacred, and you have to look at it that way. It's an education. And it's been really difficult to educate our European friends because they have a different mentality, very Western. And so just this past Wednesday, she surprised me and put forth our rights of nature to the state. So we have a House bill that's been introduced into the state now. And now we can reference that when we're doing our education campaign. So I'm been really proud of it. It is very serious.
Nobody else has done that.
Yeah, not in the state. And she took a step forward because she saw it, because I was able to make a connection to her because she has cancer. And I'm like, how do you think you got that cancer? Because you're not looking at nature as your relative. You're looking at it as you own it. You can't do that. And it's been an education. That's like one of the strategies trying to get people to understand. And I've listened to Casey's words all the time. I'm like, wow, she's such a motivational speaker. I really need you to come up show. You gotta motivate.
My husband is Catawba, you know.
Yes. He told us that we took us to the airport bus. Beautiful. We have a lot of, we've really changed hearts and minds. And one of the things that we did was we went through the process of having an AIM chapter. And so I've been really fortunate to be the chapter director of our 17 Rivers AIM for the last 2 years. And we are teaching and educating people about what does that mean to build a movement and not be performatory, right? Not just saying, oh, I got the cash, right? Like that really means standing up for your people. And I've really enjoyed all the chances that I've been able to come. Like, my husband has been so instrumental in bringing me to these places. Like, I got to go to Wounded Knee just on my birthday. That's why I said my birthday. Walking, and it's just been so great to listen to the elders and the warrior women and the people who have came before me to understand. And you know what? At the end of the day, when you take away these ridiculous federal governments and the rules that they place on our people, we're the people. We're the same people. We just have little different reasons. We're the same. We care about the same issues. So I really appreciate being here to tell my story. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I got to clean it a little bit up back this way with my relatives back here from up north. Shannon uses Ponca now because we use it in all of our resolutions. So she said that we recognize the rights of Nishu in Missouri when she really meant Niji.
Excuse me.
The red water that is the salt pork that comes through ours, because we would love to do that. The Missouri River, the Nishu is smoking water. And the way Mama, when all of my aunties that were part of forest removal and all of that, when we would travel up north to go to Sundance or whatever, all they'd ever want was a little bit of water from the water up the Missouri River up there, where our people originally lived as well. And they say that smoke on that water up there is where the spirits walk. And so when you get up in the morning or you're going to bed at night and you see that smoke on the water there, that the spirits are in there, and they're giving you the opportunity to listen to that water, to be able to hear what the ancestors are thinking, or maybe even not just the Pahalinge, but the ones, not just the ones that came before, but the ones that are coming, are in that form right there. Just so much is spurred every time I listen to everybody speak. And my sister-in-law was talking a little bit earlier, and I was hearing about the new AIM. I'm hearing about the old AIM. And, I really wanted to also give a little breakdown, because she spoke to my daughter about that a little bit, because she was raised in the original AIM days, born in 1970. And so her understanding is AIM as a movement. And there is a new AIM in Oklahoma, and there's been in many famous phases of it, but a new, where you do have to pay dues. You do have to earn a patch. And that has never been part of our understanding of what AIM is. AIM is a spiritual movement. And it has its roots in your heart and in your spirit and in the context of who you are. And the newer AIM for those of us, and she brought that to mind, that other people who weren't raised in it might see it as like the club almost. Not the one that you're doing there, because you're bringing the spirit with it. But in some places here in Oklahoma, we've all felt this respectful, wonderful people. but they see it in a different form. They do fabulous work, but there is different ways that it expresses itself. I know we've got many more things that we need to do, so very quickly with the POMCA, I was on the council at the time that everything was happening up there at Standing Rock. You know, we had 10,000 earthquakes in Oklahoma within a 4-year period as a direct result of injection wells and fracking, and as large as a 5 point something, I can't remember, 5.34, that just crumbled buildings and everything, because when they go into the shale rock and break it down with the injection wells, they've already used solvents in the water, and it breaks it all down, and then that water is never reusable. 3 to 5 million, and there are around 10,000 injection wells in Oklahoma as well. So these earthquakes were causing all of this. So the first year in council, we passed a resolution, which is like a tribal understanding that is a law. You know, it isn't just a statute. A resolution represents us moving sovereignty another step. And sovereignty is something that we all have to push within our own personal lives and within our tribes. It can't be something that we are always being reactionary, It has to be that we set the standard for what we allow within the territories of our own home, our own bodies, our own families, our own communities, our own sovereign nations, and within the boundaries of the whole Mother Earth as we receive her direction. And we have to do it forcefully. Time is moving fast right now. Mother Earth is saying, Many of us in our households are reflecting that same feeling now. The tolerance level is here now. We're done with that. Now it's time not only to push that sovereignty, so we did pass a moratorium on fracking and injection wells. The Bureau of Indian Affairs had a little bitty fit, and we just pushed it right down their throat. This is what we believe. This is what we know has to happen before the rest of us suffer environmental genocide, before our unborn continue to be wiped out, before they even get a chance to go. We have to do this. We passed a law, a statute, movement rights, visited our community, our family, our people, our community, folks in Oklahoma, folks from around came to visit. And we passed a statute, the first statute that any indigenous people of Turtle Island passed, that says that we recognize the rights of nature. And within that document, we also recognize the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, because we have to constantly reference a higher court, as AIM has done in the past. We have to also be able to build into those statutes the cosmology that we have been taught with our original teachings, and to begin to reference the ways that we talk about things within our own language, because it makes a difference. We also use their language so they can hear us, because they got no ears except for themselves. So all of the layers that each and every one of us can come up with, and then more, the spiritual guidance, the guidance of the water, the guidance of the earth, the guidance of the winds, the guidance of the fire, has to all be included in these pieces of paper that are living documents. They're written on a tree. They're written on paper. They mean something. They're written in the wind. They're written in the voice, which is our original way of of being able to communicate with one another. They're written in those forms of the spirits that walk on the water. They're already there. What do we do to recognize them? How do we make these be part of our everyday existence and beyond?
Yes.
And beyond.
Yes.
Let this be the ripple in the middle of the pond. Let's toss that in there. And then let it ripple out. You know, as Shannon was mentioning, all the countries around the earth right now are beginning to look at these models set by indigenous cosmology and by indigenous leadership of how they, within their territories, can begin to utilize these same things as the natural laws already are doing and say, shun, no more
No more.
oil in our waters, no more poison in the winds, no more fires that are disrespected because they have their ways too, no more modification, genetically modified seeds to feed our children. Food sovereignty.
Yes.
Spiritual sovereignty. Cultural sovereignty. Voices that are taken to every single level of our own governments, our own homes, our own territories, our own communities, within the federal government, within the international governments, whatever way that we have to take it. These guys took up guns so that we could sit here and just say words to one another. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're having these meetings. What if there was each one of you had 10 more people with you? One more person with you. When you get back to your communities, you don't just go take the knowledge, you take the action. Without the actions to follow these words, we're just going to continue to enjoy each other's company. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I like action. That's one of the things that when we were talking about, you know, the AIM movement, the community actions and the things that we do when movement rights comes to our territory. You know, when brothers stood up and the AIM song came on, I just jumped up and walked over there and started dancing. And as I stood there, I thought, whoa, my leg is broken. I'm not but the power that comes with solidarity, with songs of warriors, with the upholding of the men in our lives, which is so vital during this particular time, because so much of that has been forgotten in this time of rebalance of women. And we got to be able to come at this in balance from every direction. Women have their ways, sister-in-law. Thank you for reminding us. Women have their strengths, their powers, their contributions innately. Innately. Men too. Men too. I want to give great thanks to my brothers-in-law, to each and every warrior here for what you do for us. We've behind. I thank you. I thank you. That's the future way, and it is the balanced way. And as women come back into balance, we have to be sure that we make sure that we don't try to overbalance this beauty that Mother Earth and Father Son, fire and water. Yeah, that's us. And we got this. Yeah. So we also passed this one that's called, I think I brought the whole wrong papers. This what you got? Oh, no, I found some. This was about a trip to Rome. It was awesome. Yeah. We went on a Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature trip up there, GARN. So you guys can look that up. There's also an indigenous council on that one. But here among those, we're taking.
And why does the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature have an Indigenous Council?
Because we lead it.
Because everybody is learning that they have to look back towards the original stewards of the land that have maintained those knowledges that they've had all of these generations. Even if we don't realize we still know it, we know it. It's like your blood memory. You got it going there. So that's why, like the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature is looking at indigenous communities around the world. And for some of us who have been more pasteurized, as she said earlier, then they borrow indigenous people from other parts of the world and come in and remind them, you know, of their blood memories and the things that they had going on there. So,
Yeah. So this is the resolution incorporating into tribal law pre-existing and immutable rights and responsibilities for the health and welfare of Nisga'a and Nijide, also known as the Arkansas and Salt Fork Rivers, and all Ponca water bodies. And I love that we got to slip that in there, because I'm a Ponca water body. All those little ponds that the farmers have out there, those are Ponca water bodies, the creeks, the rivers. We still haven't tested this in court, but we do have, with this resolution, the ability to take them to Ponca court eventually. We still got to straighten all that out. Yes, sir.
I'll give you a chance.
Talk to me.
We'll give you a chance. Talk to you, okay? Uncle Craig? May I? Thank you. My name is Gary Bettis. I'm the former caretaker of the Peyote Gardens down in the Rio Grande Valley in Miranda City, Texas. My responsibility was to make all nations, U.S. and Canada and Mexico, welcome in our home place in Texas, the Peyote Gardens, for the Native American Church. Myself and my family, we held that position for 13 years until the property sold and now belongs to the Church of Oklahoma. Okay, Chuck, I'll speak in your direction. The Church of, now that property belongs to the Church of Oklahoma. In our ceremonies, our peyote ceremonies, there's this time at midnight when we bring in midnight water. And what's happening is that there's a river in the sky of stars that lines up with the San Antonio River as it flows through Brackenridge Park. Both the stars and the river are identical. They're the same. And beneath that constellation is a constellation of birds, specifically the phoenix, which we know in our ceremonies as the double-crested cormorant or anhinga, those big feathers. We dip that water in that bucket, we bless somebody special, needing blessings and love and feeling renewal. Well, those birds nest along the San Antonio River. And right now that river is not flowing because our water restrictions, the water restrictions too long for the springs to stay flowing year round because they're watering, our beautiful yards. But more importantly, these birds right now, for the sake of development, outside developers, they're removing these birds, these birds, and our that nest in our holy river that we all sing about in our peyote meeting. They're removing those birds feathers we use for blessings. They're removing them from the river. They're taking those birds. They're removing these holy birds that are constellations in our sky. These birds nest on the river. They're removing them for the sake of development. they're breaking a covenant. The city of San Antonio is breaking the covenant that these birds have had with this river and in the skies for thousands of years.
Wow.
So powerful that it still remains as a tenet in our ceremony. So my honey has brought me here for this opportunity to ask you all, Poncas, I know the Poncas, I know the Uchis, Comanches are going to jump right in and help us out. But our attorneys have told us that, Gary, you can't do it. You're not going to be able to do it yourself and among your peoples because you're not federally recognized. And that's okay. We know who we are. We know where we're from. We know what Yanawana means. It's okay. But we need help from federally recognized tribes, specifically those who are 33 chapters in the Native American Church of Oklahoma, to help us out to bring those birds back into the San Antonio River and Breckenridge Park to maintain that balance. We still believe in as peoples of this medicine. And so that's really all I have to say, Auntie. Thank you so much for giving me that chance.
I will tell you that I brought this to our chairman already, Oliver Littlecook, who is the main person, our chief of our Native American church, and he has said that the punk will sign on with you.
Okay, thank you.
We need to talk, because I can help you with the chapters, the Native American churches here too.
Well, what will happen is the law clinic of the University of Texas at Austin will provide you with what to do. I will facilitate. I've been facilitating these ceremonies now since 2005, since Grandma Amada passed away, that family that was there before us. I'm still there. I helped start the pilgrimage to that house with the Comanches, Apaches, and Kiowas. So you're talking about, well, anyway, those folks. Yeah. So those were covenants we made together, and we still honor them together. I'm just not in charge of there anymore, and I'm kind of glad, you know, because that can be a hot seat.
Okay.
But okay.
All right, along with that thought right there, my Uncle Oliver was asking if the rights of nature might be something that he could utilize to help legally deal with this too. So, yeah, we're all in this together and we're going to continue to press this. We do have a phone over here.
Who's the Michael Jordan fan?
Was that one of the girls?
There's a platypus on there too.
It's Lola.
It's Lola?
Yeah. I have a 2-year-old great-grandson who came in all huffy and puffy the other day, and he's like, I had a dream and Jordan just stuffed me, man. He's only this big. Golly, good dreaming, bud. You're in here with Jordan. I'm going to see if anybody else in the panel has a closing thought, or if anybody out there has a question for anybody on the panel. Now, I know my sister-in-law is going to come up right after this panel and say, well, I was wondering. I'm trying. I want some of that fried bread.
Oh man, before he goes to sleep.
Yes.
I was going to mention this earlier, but since we're, recognizing, Wounded Knee and what the Warriors has done, but, one of the things I wanted to mention to the doctor here, and I'm sure that Jason could hear it too, but while we were, the walks coming in, man, it was beautiful to hear and see some of these walks. And in the distance, you could hear a little gunfire where some of the walkers were coming. But, when they got to Wounded Knee, what stood out to me, and they did the talks, and then they started fired into Wounded Knee. And I could just imagine hearing all that noise and gunshots. I get, wow, man, these guys were standing up to all that was coming. We had a 30 caliber or 50 caliber. You know, that's how a couple of our brothers there lost their lives. They were shot with a 50 caliber, you know.
Yeah.
So, man, so I really have respect for my brothers that stood up in that time because it was a war. And then, you know, of course, Bigfoot at that time, they were trying to pray. When the army were all shooting at them, and I can just imagine, that's what came to my mind. And that was also came to my mind when they were having a ceremony. I think it was just a reminder of what our people had to stand up for at that time, to hear the gunshots, to pray, and all that was going on. And it just hit me real good, you know, and I just wanted to say, thank you guys, man. And it's an honor to be here with these ladies. Always empowering, you know, and I just want to say thank you for inviting me.
Well, just want to ask you all to say thank you to the panelists here. Next, we're going to have Heather Milton Lightning. And we can do a 5-minute break, no more. And then we're going to have Heather and Daisy come up, and Krista.
I had a selfish reason for that, but I lost my phone. So if anybody sees a phone sitting somewhere,
How does somebody call the number?
it's silent. I turned it silent off.
Will it vibrate?
It might vibrate. You what?
So we're going on a 5-minute break, but this is what the fire was saying about the birds in that area. So I just wanted to give you guys a chance to take a look at it real quick before I give this poster back to the person that was showing it around. So we're going to be on a 5-minute break. I'm probably going to hold it real quick.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Now tell me again. Okay, so this is... Can you explain to
Yeah, to her?
Yeah. So if you want to... Hold on 1 sec.
They're inside my purse in a box.
There we go.
Okay, so Uncle...
You gotta talk really loud.
Okay,
The microphone there.
this is the constellation of Eridanus. That's Greek for river in the sky. Okay, and the San Antonio River, as it flows through Brackenridge Park, is the exact same shape. So right now, where the river's touching the horizon, see, this is the horizon. That's midnight water in our ceremonies. And see the constellation of birds beneath all that. They're underworld. We're in the underworld at that time, and we take these bird feathers, tail feathers out, and use them. And especially the cormorant feathers, we dip them in that water from this river, and we bless somebody with them. That has survived as a tenet in our ceremonies for thousands of years. And right now, the birds that nest along this river are being removed for development. So what that greatly affects that tenet in our ceremonies and the ecological system that inspired us to pray this way. You know, that's what's going on, and we need some help.
We're good.
Thank you.
So we're gonna turn it over here for now. Just wait for your break ends. I might put this on mute for a few minutes.
Oh, I can't think of her name.
Anyway. Yeah, but are you going to be here tomorrow, too?
I'm hoping so. We've got a lot to balance between now and Monday.
Oh, yeah.
Break. We'll be back shortly.
Anything y'all did to make me jump out of my chair.
Oh,
No, for real. It's encouraging.
Yeah, good. Very direct. Understandable.
We had made a promise, a sacred covenant with the Creator. We had made a promise, a sacred covenant with the Creator who gave us permission to live here and had provided everything for us that we needed in order to live here on this Mother Earth. And so we come speaking from that perspective. When we talk about water ethics from an indigenous worldview, we rely on the teachings and the sharing of indigenous knowledge that has been continuously passed down from time immemorial. The world's religions, many of them have these scholarly scripts. We as indigenous people, we do not have those. We go to a place, to the water, and we receive teachings. You might find our messages written on the rocks. The symbols that are there are teachings for us to follow, to walk a good life in balance. We had made a promise, a sacred covenant with the Creator who gave us permission to live here and had provided everything for us that we needed in order to live here on this Mother Earth. And so we come speaking from that perspective. When we talk about water ethics from an indigenous worldview, we rely on the teachings and the sharing of indigenous knowledge that has been continuously passed down from time immemorial. The world's religions, many of them have these scholarly scripts. We as indigenous people, we do not have those. We go to a place, to the water, and we receive teachings. You might find
All right, everybody. The 5 minutes have passed. We're gathering back up to start continuing on with the next panelist coming up soon. So I'm going to turn the camera back around. All right, everybody. The 5 minutes have passed. Please put a thumbs up in the chat if you're able to hear.
I'm getting there. I want to thank our panelists. We talked earlier about 50 years after Wounded Knee, and where that energy has gone in terms of moving forward, Indigenous organizing, Indigenous-led organizing, climate justice organizing, and I'm really so happy to have these beautiful, amazing women, Krista Mancias, Daisy Francoeur, and Heather Milton Lightning, are going to each talk to us a little bit about the work that they're doing, and also how they see bringing that work forward. So thank you so much. Heather, you're going to start. Or not. You want to start.
Self-organized.
Yeah. Heather.
These organizers are easy to organize.
Okay, not it. Sorry. Okay.
Dang, Heather. Dang. Okay, I can go first. Okay. I'm ready. Okay, Siguri Swagwag, Daisy Niyongas, Anawa, Niwakakujota, Onaida Aga, Niwakitowaga. My name is Daisy Francoeur. I'm from the United Nations of Wisconsin. I'm really happy to be here and want to just acknowledge my relative Joe Kay for inviting me here into your community, inviting me here to speak on this panel, and wanting to acknowledge all of those who helped make this happen, all the people who volunteered, and all the cooks, all those behind the scenes who may not be here physically, but have helped pave the way for us to be here in this space collectively. And I'm really, feel really moved from the earlier conversation today, talking about Wounded Knee and recognizing as a young person in this movement, I have so much still to learn, and recognizing like the privilege as a young person in this movement that we are standing on the foundation of those who have paved the way for us. And so just recognizing all of the sacrifice way. And so I've been just kind of thinking about, and I've had the privilege, so I work at the Indigenous Environmental Network as our communications director with Joe Kay, and we recently, for the 50th, wrote a piece about commemorating the 50th anniversary of Wounded Knee, and so I was really fortunate to talk with folks like Lenny Foster and others to just get that kind of first-person understanding of that. And so being really inspired by that, I've been thinking a lot about the occupations that came after that, right, as a result of Wounded Knee. And so just some that came to mind are like Sigorte in California, the occupation there, to, of course, Standing Rock, to 1491 Landback Lane, on the East Coast and Haudenosaunee Territory. And so just thinking about this like visual journey, right, of all of the occupations that have came as a result of Wounded Knee. And listening to our relatives earlier today reminded me of how it's inspired Indigenous peoples like myself, but all over Turtle Island across the globe to like stand firm in our traditional ways of being and knowing. And being very clear to those outside of our community what our bottom lines are, and that we don't compromise those things. And so I'm just really grateful listening to the elders here today, and reminding us that that is important for us wherever we go, that we carry that. And so like the work that I do is very much behind the scenes on social media, working with Morgan here behind the camera to make sure that we're like making this information accessible to our communities in the best way that we can. And since I've like gone into communications work, I think a lot about
what it means to assert our sovereignty in digital spaces, right? The spaces that we can't see, but yet still connect us across landscapes and waterways and airways, and how do we assert our sovereignty in those ways and in a good way. And so, like, my understanding of, or how I interpret digital organizing is using technology to mobilize our communities, to assert our rights, and to bring people together. And so, as most of us are probably on social media, there's social media and digital platforms. I see them as a tool for bringing visibility to our people, to the issues that we're facing. It's a tool for advocacy, it's a tool for education, it's for outreach, but ultimately how I see it is that it's a way to also reclaim our narrative. And one thing that really stood out to me earlier from the panel was the question, who owns history, right? And like thinking for me as like a young person, like the school books that we were forced to read, like obviously we're not truthful. And so I think about that in this work as like, what's my responsibility in this work, knowing we have such a large platform with IEN and we have all of these followers. Like, it's just so important to be intentional, and that like words carry so much power, and that like every word matter, and especially when we're using like things that I think about is like we're using the English language as like the medium to communicate, and also recognizing the English language is like embedded, like so much violence is embedded in that language, but yes, that's the medium and how we're communicating. And so like these are the things that keep me up at night. And I think about like just making a simple caption, and I get stuck on like one word sometimes, you know, like the impact or the what is my intention translating in the same way that the impact is happening. And so I think about that in this kind of form of organizing that's a little bit different, but it's an evolution of those who came before us. But I see digital organizing and advocacy as a way to mobilize the masses, both inside and outside of our communities. I see it as a way to shift consciousness, and that really, that the work in the digital sphere, I like to say, you know, it's strategic storytelling, it's building narrative power, and it's reclaiming that power, but it's also, and I think you maybe said earlier, Casey, disruption. The word disruption was also a tool to disrupt the status quo, to disrupt the narrative that is being forced on us, you know, for decades. And so, I guess I don't want to speak too much longer because I'm really eager to hear from my sisters here. But I see digital organizing as a tool to connect and reconnect, to reach those that maybe we can't come together physically, to speak our truth, and to build power in a very rapid way. I see digital organizing also as a really inclusive strategy of organizing. So for our relatives who, for whatever reason, aren't able to travel and come in person, you know, physically, it's a way to still reach them and to engage them and to not leave our people behind. I see it as a tool to bring those relatives in. However, I'm not just gonna like say digital organizing is great. There's a lot of like, again, with the intentionality of this work, there's a lot of like cons to it, or things that we have to be mindful of. And just like our relatives at Wounded Knee or any other kind of occupation or grassroots work, you know, there's always this constant monitoring of our people. So we have to, again, be like really intentional in every single word that we're using and every bit of information that we're putting out there, because we have to put the safety of our communities first. And so these are like the things that a lot of people in digital organizing have to think about, but also having to navigate, again, this is nothing new, but you know, censorship as well. You know, we're hearing all these bans coming forward about like banning TikTok, you know, and which is crazy, but TikTok has been like a really incredible tool for young people to get really involved in understanding what's happening, and also for people to really express their truth and what's happening in this world. And the federal government, states, all these, you know, oppressive people and systems are recognizing like how we are building power rapidly as young people. And so censorship is a very big issue that we're always navigating in communications work. Even in like Instagram and Facebook, you have to become like this official, you have to go through this like official accreditation process to like post about certain issues. Like you pay for advertising so you can reach more people. They're always like not approving our promotions. So it's just like we're always having to navigate that. But that concept is nothing new for our people. But yet it still exists like in the digital sphere or the digital world. And one thing I also want to acknowledge is like as a challenge that I see a lot in like digital organizing is, you know, our people, we're all in different journeys of our reclamation and decolonization, and so we all, myself included, you know, have a lot of internalized oppression, and so we all know we're all part of different community forums on Facebook. We know how that gets down and can be really like difficult spaces, and so that's just like another layer that we have to be mindful of. Like every word that we put out there in the world that never gets lost on the internet. It never gets lost. It's always accessed in some way, archived in some way. But even thinking through these kind of virtual mechanisms, like there's power that we're putting out there, and so we have to be really intentional with what we think, and then how that gets translated into our words, and how that gets translated into what we type. So I think I'll stop there. I don't want to be like preaching to the choir. I know a lot of folks know this, but that's some of the work that we've been doing. And I also want to acknowledge Morgan Bringsman, who's behind the camera, is our first digital organizing fellow at IEN. So it's a new area of our work, and so we're really excited that we're going to explore that as a strategy for the work that we're doing in our organization. So, Yala, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's really, I don't do Facebook or TikTok, although I do have some little dances I think would be nice for TikTok. Should I show you? Or any of those digital things. And maybe when after the others speak, I'd like you to come back to something that I hear as a grandma and a great-grandma. There's two phrases I hear. One of them is about lateral violence on that digital stuff. And let's see, the more recent studies about how it affects young women's esteem. I would really like to understand a little bit more, because I also see it as a valuable tool. I see what happens, but I also hear that other side, you know, and I'd like to get your opinion on that a little bit later. Thank you.
I guess like me and Casey were talking earlier, we kind of stepped back from public speaking. And Casey was like, no, you're gonna do this. I'm like, okay then.
My girl.
My name's Heather Milton Lightning. I'm from Treaty 4, which is the southern part of Saskatchewan, little part of Manitoba, a little tiny piece of Alberta. It's the homeland to the Dakota, well, the Osheti-Shakoan, the Nehiyaw and Anishinaabe people. So I'm kind of a mix of all of those, and I think some Blackfoot, but we have to go through genealogy to figure that out. So I'm a part of founding a group called the Indigenous Peoples Power Project, and my background, like Casey was mentioning, I started youth organizing with this group that we founded, just because someone was like, we need a name. Everyone, we were doing stuff in the media, and they're like, we need to give a name. And so there's three of us with this little tiny shell, but this big, having a smudge, and we're like, well, we'll just call it Native Youth Movement. And I think like This is a group of kind of young people that were in an urban center, which is Winnipeg, Manitoba, in the late 90s. And a lot of us, were the survivors of the survivors of residential school. A lot of us were the first ones that didn't go to residential school. So we were kind of living off the residue of that. And a lot of us were displaced, not in our home communities, etc. We went to a school called Chilliers High School, which is in the north end, which is the hood. That's where all the Native people are. We have one of the biggest populations in Winnipeg, in the country of Canada, of Native people. But those people that taught us in that school politicized us, which is probably the wrong thing to do. They taught us our culture, they taught us our history, they taught us about colonization, they taught us to have self-esteem. But most importantly, they taught us to think critically. And so we birthed a whole movement out of that. And it wasn't intentional, it was just my friend kind of saying, well, I had a dream about taking a fire to the ocean. And her 5-year-old son had the same dream. And she said, so I'm gonna take a fire to the ocean. And we all decided we're gonna go with you. And part of that was telling the story of what was going on in Winnipeg, like the high rates of prostitution and suicide, and like Indian gang members, this was kind of the birthplace of them in Canada, and that they were just out of control. And we could see like prostitution and poverty and all these things, and we understood that was because of colonization, but we didn't have the articulation for that. But we were also really mad and wanted to do something about it. And it's kind of funny because, this walk that we did across Canada eventually took us 5 years. We started in Winnipeg and went to Pacific Ocean. And it wasn't like a protest, it was a ceremony. And there was young people that were Christian and atheists and traditional and gang members. And, all these different kinds of people came together during this walk. And I think to me that was the first version of nonviolent direct action that we did, but it was based on a dream. It was based on a ceremony. And I think that's the thing that I've heard a lot of people talk about throughout the years of just going all over the place and visiting. It's just the deep connection that we have and how we activate that with ceremony and how ceremony has always guided us. I really want to appreciate Wanya for being here because I know her and her crew that were at Standing Rock were part of doing a lot of those ceremonies, right? And really ensuring that ceremonial leaders were there, giving some guidance and providing those ceremonies to folks that were in leadership there. But I also think about, Wounded Knee was something that was really inspiring for a lot of people in Canada. Like the Red Power movement spread across the country, which predates us. And then we've seen, the uprising in Oka, which is really famous in the 1990s in Canada. And the US military, or the Canadian military came in and they were trying to fight the people over a golf course. They wanted to create a golf course over burial lands, right? And they brought in the military to fight them. And of course, it's women that organized and fought that. It was the men that were the front lines of that, but it was always women. And I think it's so interesting when we're talking about and hearing the stories about all the shooting and the rounds that were shot at the people. And I've heard the same thing in Oka, that they were fired at so many times. You could see like the bullets in the trees, but they were saying like it was our prayers that kept us safe. It's our prayers and our ceremony, our belief that we were doing the right thing that kept us safe. And I think about that a lot in terms of like the reason behind this, but also like advising, like when we're training young people, like, Greenpeace and RAN and all these environmental organizations, they do actions too. But they don't do it with a spiritual guidance. They don't do it with protocols. They don't do it with activating that connection to the land and to the spirits, right? And I think that's what makes us doing actions so much different. And a lot of actions that we've seen in Canada have been frontline community defense, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Wet'suwet'en territories and the fight against the pipelines, or about up north in the tar sands. Like, to be honest, the tar sands, there was one family that fought it. One family, but for 20 years in one community, to have like a whole movement globally. And that took 15 years to get a global movement, and it took a lot of sacrifice. And it was really 4 young women in the north that led that movement with our support, and that's always what we want to do, is support leadership on the ground. But it takes time, it takes energy and commitment. And And I think that's always the hard thing that people also don't understand. What makes Indigenous communities so different is like oftentimes it's generational legacies, right? That we've been resisting for a long time. And I think the one thing, like I also used to work for IEN as a youth organizer a long time ago, but I think the one thing I really, really appreciate about working there was at the time we had a 14-member board, and there was a circle of elders from all over, like from Alaska, all over the country, and they predated AIM. And I think the one thing that they really instilled in my brain and nailed it in over and over and over again is like how important it is to really uphold our sovereignty as Indigenous people. And I don't mean that in a legal sense, but as in the sense of a person, in the sense of power, in the sense of the spiritual responsibility, but also like how important that is to pass that message on to future generations. I think the other thing that they really instilled is like, it's your culture, it's your language, and the most important thing is the connection to land is what's gonna save you. And I don't mean save our people, but that's what's gonna keep you going. Because I think the thing that I think about is like, where I come from, we're very focused on residential schools, but there was a whole legacy of history of colonial clearing of the plains, right? That was super, super violent, that we don't talk about, right? So I know that when they're saying that, that's what saved them, right? And so we can hold those things close in a really important way, we're gonna be okay. But I also think about like, how do we do that in terms of actions? So I really want to appreciate Daisy's work, the work that you're doing in terms of digital thinking, because I know our young people are there. But I think one of the things that we've really seen in Standing Rock was those back patches. Like some are wearing them on their skirts, I've seen people with them on their backs. But it's a really simple way for someone to capture an image of what you're there for. Because oftentimes we'll see actions and it could be anywhere. They don't know why you're there, what you're fighting, right? And I think that's the thing, like really, to me, you know, the work around story is actually law. Like where I come from, there's laws that are recognized by the Canadian government that say our history actually is legal, technical law. And so like that story is actually really important because it's our oral history. It's also when in terms of actions, it's how we're applying that law, how we're holding it up, and how we're actually making it seen, right? Because, you know, there's a lot of intention and thought behind a lot of these images that we create. Like, I think the one thing that I really love right now is just watching things like Land Back and seeing the beadwork and the paintings and the artworks and all the crazy memes. Like I was talking to Wanya about being a meme queen, but it's a form of communication that's funny, right? That our people like, but it passes a message, right? And that goes again back to our story. You know, all the jokes and all the things that are grounded in this story, which is law, right? It's law. It's law for our people. So I feel like actions, you know, do those things. The one thing that I was thinking about, you know, coming down here, like I drove down from Canada, and I got to see all this territory. I was really thinking about the different strategies and how that's kind of evolved over time. You know, like I really feel like what folks were saying about Wounded Knee is like it was this moment for us to take a stand. You know, we're gonna risk it, we're gonna fight, we're gonna take this stand, how important that was. And now, you know, we see a lot of people where they're fighting their community to protect their way of life, right? And they're at the front lines of defense against these big giant corporations, right? And I think like our experience in organizing the tar sands is that it was really a violent thing in that territory to fight against the biggest corporations on earth, making the most money in the history of money. Every bank in the globe is invested in them. But we were up against the biggest players there is, right? And I think like when I think about actions, I also automatically think about strategy. Like the two go hand in hand for me. And the reason being is that, you know, if we're gonna target Exxon or Shell or, you know, ConocoPhillips or whoever, these big companies, we really have to think about, you know, who has the power to give us what we want? Who's the CEO that makes a decision? You know, who has the most money invested? You know, who's gonna benefit from these projects? And how do we fight them back? And I think this was the first time where Indigenous people started going to places like Europe, and places like New York, Toronto, and all the financial centers to target the banks, to target the corporations and insurance companies that underwrite these projects. We weren't just saying like the Canadian government is fault, but we're also saying like the companies are at fault And we're also trying to say, like, if you invest in this project, we're gonna fight it. We're gonna be there, we're gonna stop it, we're gonna fight it, and we're gonna cost you money. And because of that, you need to stop doing this project. We also need to tell you that what the Canadian government did by giving you X lease to mine here, or to build an oil rig here, or to frack here, or whatever kind of development is, they did it illegally. So not only are we gonna stand and we're gonna stop you on the front lines of this project, but we're also gonna sue you. We're gonna sue the Canadian government. And so, you know, they thought that these threats were idle, but it's true. And I think the thing that, you know, we always stood by, we always told people, particularly in Canada, is that Indigenous people have more power than anyone else. You know, not just because like we're standing on power with our ancestors on our territory, like that's a whole powerful thing. But the other piece is that nobody else has the right to say no to a development project legally in Canada except for us. And no one believed us. Not the environmental organizations who got the big bucks for these campaigns. No one believed us until we proved the point over and over and over again. You know, and we raised the money with different communities to do Supreme Court challenges, right? You know, and the actions were a part of that strategy. They weren't the strategy, they were a part of elevating that campaign. And I think the thing that I'm really excited and happy about is, you know, with the tar sands in particular, it started with healing walks, where they took water and prayers, and they walked around all of those projects, and many people have been invited there. And so they're gonna have a new one, another one this year, and they haven't done it in a while. But that was like the easiest first way to do actions in a place that was really super violent, that was inundated by giant companies and security and all of these things. So it needs to start somewhere. But I've also really been thinking about like the strategy too, you know, like oftentimes there's so much focus on stopping a project, but not thinking about like how do we go after the people who are forcing these projects on our people, and not just the government. Because I think we're in a new day and age where, you know, we used to go to the UN and that had some traction, right? We could shame the Canadian government and they might do something about it. But that doesn't work anymore. And the reality is that the corporations have more power and are controlling our governments. Right. So we really need to rethink the way our strategy is working and how we're fighting back. And I think that's the thing that I really appreciate about working with those NGOs that do the finance work, is because it gave us more leverage with the people who have the money. You know, we were able to see the corporations face to face, the boards, the CEOs. Like we met with the chairperson of the Royal Bank of Scotland, and he was a knight, so we had to call him Sir Charles. But it was the first time these people who have all this money, who have all this power, had ever met an Indigenous person from the site of a project that they were trying to develop, and had to answer to it. Right? And see, like that's where we have power, and I think that's really important for us to think about, like not just the strategy, but how we're doing that. So, you know, I think we've learned a lot over the years. You know, the one thing I will say is, and thinking about this in terms of intergenerational things, is that I really hope young people will sit with our older generations, but also us, and really critically think about what we've done. Like learn our stories, learn the strategies, and learn what didn't work. Learn what did work, because I think oftentimes I see young people reinventing wheels that didn't work back in the day, you know, and that we don't need to do that. And I think the thing that was reinforced to me as a young person is it's my responsibility at that time to take what y'all had done and move it a step further. And every generation, that's their responsibility, is to take what we've done and move it a step further. And that means being critical of what we've done, because we didn't know what to do. We were just kind of winging it, guessing it, hoping it would work out. But I think that's the thing that I want to go back to, this idea of art and innovation. Like a lot of our young people, especially online, are doing this stuff called Indigenous futurism and like sci-fi and like all this amazing creative, I don't even know how to, like it's such visionary artistic work in so many different methodologies, but it's really leading our people in a new direction, right? And I really want to commend that and hope that, you know, we continue to see this innovation, because it needs to happen. You know, oftentimes we get stuck in our muddy boots and we don't want to change because change is uncomfortable. But I really want to encourage our young people to be critical of us, but to do a better job, and for us to support that, but also, you know, to keep your mind open and to be visionary and creative, because that's really what's gonna save our people. You know, Louis Riel talked about like her people will sleep for 100 years and it will be the artists that wake them up. And I really believe that. And so that's what I think about the future. You know, oftentimes people are like, the sky is falling, but I see this as an opportunity for us to change, become better, and innovate. And I think that's also, you know, part of this idea of decolonization. It's healing, but it's also innovation and change. Because we wouldn't have gotten here if our work for our people adapting to some really horrible things, right? And like hiding our ceremonies, but still keeping them alive, you know? And being sneaky and creative about how they did that. Like there's so much we would have lost. So it's our time now to take that back up, but also innovate it. And I think that's the thing that I really appreciate about our culture. It's not static, it changes over time. You know, and I was really thinking about that question. We used to do a lot of work with the gangs in Manitoba. They were part of our circle. And you know, one of my friends in Minnesota, she's Mandawan, and she was doing similar work with gang members, and she said, you know, a long time ago when the warriors would go out, and if they killed someone, there was a ceremony to wipe them of that death, and to clean their bodies, and to re-prepare them and bring them back into society. And so, you know, there are different ways that we have that would need to be innovated for our own people to take care of us. You know, I think the last thing that I just wanted to talk about very shortly was just, you know, I really want to appreciate our young innovators for really reminding us to be trauma informed. You know, in our organizing and our actions and the way we do things, because the reality is we carry PTSD, we carry trauma, you know, not just of ourselves, but of our ancestors. And so it's our duty and our responsibility to heal. And I think, like, personally, I've been doing a lot of personal healing, but I think that's my responsibility. But I also think when it comes to the work, I really want to listen to those people that are like, we should talk about pronouns. We should talk about all of these things. You know, I'm really forcing us to check ourselves, because that's how we evolve, you know, and it's really, really important. Because, you know, these things like sexual abuse and physical abuse, it only takes 3 generations for them to be gone. So there's hope in these things like sexual, and I think in a few generations, maybe that PTSD will go away. Maybe we'll have new ceremonies and new ways for us to take care of ourselves and our warriors, because we need them. So that's all I have to say. Sorry, I'm long-winded. In my young
Thank you
age.
so much.
Greetings, my relatives and my blood relatives. My name is Krista Mancias. I am the executive director for the Carisopa Mecruva tribe of Texas, 501c3. I'm also the daughter of my dad, Juan Mancias, who in the past couple of years handed this position to me because of the work that I've continued to do for the youth and now for the people, for all my people and the tribe itself. So I think one of the big things, especially for us in the South and Texas, is, you know, when it comes to organizing, is how do we outreach to the other communities, to our other indigenous relatives on both sides of the river? Because when we talk about decolonization, and we got to get rid of that segmentation of colonial borders.
Yes.
And the separation of those borders and the barriers that come with it, whether it's because of a country, whether it's because of a state, or because of a language. And language justice in South Texas is becoming a big movement because of our relatives who do not speak English, who do not speak their original language of their people because it was lost, because they were not pasteurized, but we were either missionized or Christianized or Mexicanized by the state itself.
Yep.
And the oppressors of our people. And so the language justice issue of organizing has been our biggest outreach to get the word out so people can understand the impacts of what is happening, because they are our relatives, whether they're on this side of the Rio Grande River or on the other side of the river in Mexico or in, you know, the islands. they are our relatives no matter what. We're all part of Turtle Island, and that's one of the main things we've been taking on to make sure that everybody knows the impacts that are happening soon, and getting their youth involved and bringing them up into our circle of indigenous roots, so they can work further in the future and have something to take back to their communities, especially to their elders who do not speak Spanish. Not speak English and just speak Spanish, because there's a lot of them in South Texas and that. So we take root in and who our people are in South Texas, and the rich history that it does have and hold because of colonization, and a lot of our histories, no matter where we are across Turtle Island, they all speak the same. They all speak the same histories, no matter where we are. Of generational trauma that has been passed down from our relatives 500 years ago. And I think that the understanding is what my dad always says is 530 years ago, they came here for one thing. They came here to take the resources out of our lands, out of our homelands, and ship them across the ocean. And 530 years later, they're still doing the same thing. They're stealing our resources for our ways of life and taking them across the ocean. A lot of that is not, we don't even use all of that. It's for money it's profit in their pocket. And, we've had a lot of ups and downs in our battles and our wins throughout Texas. And we just recently had our Bridge to the Ancestral Youth Run Walk, where we, the organizers, the millennials and Gen X people came together to be that bridge, the gap between the ancestors and our elders to the youth, bringing that ideal of the history of the land, of what oil and gas has done to our sacred sites throughout Texas, and taking them all the way down across the river so they see the impact, so they can learn that history, so they can experience why we're trying to protect. Because we're not protesters. We all know that. We're not protesters. We're protectors. We're here to protect who we are, our ways of life, our ancestors, our history, that we are deep in rich history in our people. And that ideal has to continue throughout as we teach the youth and be impactful, to have them have that experience, to be in those spaces. And what you're doing, and Heather, you're doing, those are, in your communities, those are big, impactful spaces and pieces just to a major puzzle. And we group them together throughout Turtle Island. We can take a giant stand. On this run, we had great, victories. We found out my dad in 2016 went to France and talked to one of the banks in France that was proposed to do 2 LNG sites that were, they wanted to invest in one of the LNG sites where we're trying to defend Garcia Pasture, which is one of our old village sites. And they told us that they were going to back out of the project. They're not funding that project anymore. That's a big victory for us. So, we worked hard for that. We fought hard for that battle to get them to stop. And not just them, 4 other banks said the same day that they were not going to invest in these projects, because we went and attacked the investors. We attacked where the money was come from. We didn't attack the company anymore. We went straight to the people that the money was going to. But just like with every other victory, there is, a downfall. And how do we get out of those downfalls? Thursday was a hard day trying to travel up here for us. We took a major a setback. In that area where the river is so sacred in Boca Chica Beach, that's for us, our creation story comes out of the mouth of the Rio Grande River into the Gulf of Mexico. That's where first woman was created. And this man, one of the richest men in the world, decided to set up a rocket ship and set it off, and it exploded and failed, just like always, all his things do. But it does pollute the land, and he continues to destroy that beautiful area where our creation story begins. And it hurts that they continue to perpetuate that he is an inventor or that he is something just because he can put money into an investment. And but he is destroying the land and the earth at the same time, and the water, taking the water away. And at the same time, in DC, at the FERC meetings, they decided to permit the 2 LNGs that we've been fighting to stop on this last pristine of the Gulf Coast of Texas, and put a pipeline in. So it is very hard when we're in these movements and we take these downfalls. But where do we get the come up? Well, we come up in spaces like this. We talk about what we all need, what we're all here for, why we're here to protect each other and protect us as human beings, as people, as the original peoples of this land, and our history that is rooted, grounded into this, to the water, into the land, into the air that we breathe, and why we hold it so sacred in our hearts and in our lives. You know, we take battles. You know, when I put the water that we brought from home, you know, that water is very scarce for us. There are a lot of rivers, of the 14 sacred rivers that run through Texas. When you look at the map and you see these rivers, they look like veins, where the blood of the earth is running through the chute. That water is her blood, and it's just being drained completely dry because of oil and gas. And we're losing this fresh water, this water that we only have left. And a lot of the places that I grew up, my parents took me to all the sacred sites, to be in all the rivers, to teach. My grandmother's teaching me the lessons of life and how the water is sacred. I couldn't even take my children anymore because there's no water left. A lot of places there's no water, and you know, and we've been, you know, we fight hard, and we think about the water being the last part of who we are, and now we have all this infrastructure just taking away. We have, you know, the organizing that we bring is to inspire a people, to wake up the people of South Texas, to wake up the people in the valley, to understand that who they are. And we're getting that now, because people are seeing that we're here. We're not fighting for just us. We're fighting for them. We're fighting for their children. We're fighting for their grandparents. Fighting for just the will to be a living entity on this earth in that area. And just being a human being and continuing our life ways to be something better than what money is in somebody's pocket. What they're offering is not a good investment. What they offer is a bad investment, because it's not invested in the community. And I think that's how we've taken our organizing to a different level, as bringing the communities together to fight as one entity instead of individual entities. And I think that's the best idea, not within our state, but as relatives throughout Turtle Island, is, you know, we coming together in spaces like this, and bringing each other up and lifting each other's voices out and saying, I was here at the Four Winds Convening, and I met Heather, and she talked about her, you know, and bringing those stories of people that you've met and to your own communities, because those are how we get our word out, how we share our experiences, our life ways, our teachings, and how we come together as one for a bigger battle other than just ourselves. And you know, going across the ocean just like them and saying, hey, I'm here. I'm ready to take back what you took. Can I get it back now? But on their laws, using their laws against them, because that's how they've used their laws against us. We've all taken this trauma and we put it in this bowl, and we're ready to ship it back over the ocean and drop it on their front door. So I think we have a bigger picture, and I see that in our spaces, in our movements, and how we put ourselves out there on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, which I love TikTok because I do the TikTok scroll every time before I go to bed. But you know, they have impacts, because I learn of things. Like I've learned about other peoples and other cultures. I've learned about relatives. I've met new people going to these places and being in spaces and sharing that equality. So that organization is that who we are as a human being, to have human rights, to have clean air, clean water, and pristine land to live on. That's who we are. That's who we are. We have that right as human beings on this earth to do that. Especially being the original peoples of Turtle Island. We have that human right to our clean water, our clean air, and to have pristine land so we can continue to further on future generations. I am a 7th generation of my relatives, and I'm looking forward to the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st generations that come after me. And those are the people that I'm looking forward to, because they're the ones that I don't want to have to fight for this fight anymore. They're the ones that need that clean water. They're the ones that need that air. They're the ones that need that land. And one of my most memorable memories as a growing up as a kid and to a young adult, my grandmother, she passed away about 3 years ago now. Every night when she went to bed, she would take a glass of water and she would set it on her nightstand. And as a kid, I didn't know what. I just thought it was a glass of water. So she needed a glass of water. She had something to drink. But as I got older, I asked her, Grandma, why do you take a glass of water to your table? And she's like, to feed my spirit if I leave this earth, because the water is life. So her spirit, when she leaves that earth, that she would take that water. And every morning when she woke up, she would offer back that water back to the earth, because she lived through another night in her sleep. And every night she would take a glass of water, and every morning she would take it up and give it back to Mother Earth. And that's how sacred water is to us. We know that water is our life, but it's a teaching that I didn't understand as a child, but I got that understanding as an adult, why water is who we are, and it's a part of our life.
Thank you. I learned a lot. I appreciate each one. And Henry, thank you for listening and actually using your voice, because I've always learned from you. I appreciate you. I really care about it. I understand a bit about the social media, and I've learned from my children what they've learned out there as well. And also the unification of all of us with that. I do want to, I'm always reminded of something. First of all, these little girls going out here again. Once in a while when you guys are talking energy, I feel those 4 walking in that circle out there. And I feel that energy continuing to move throughout all of us. But the other thing that brought to mind was about how do we take care of ourselves. You all spoke on that a little bit, and how the innovations make a difference in everything. And I wanted to give you a teaching that maybe I don't say enough, except to my my girls, my sons. That comes from Parrish Williams. Did you know him?
Yes.
Here's my grandson.
What? Really?
That's fact. Yeah, he was taught by Convening or they knew the Nikagahi, or Shushe, which was my great-grandfather. And you all probably knew him as well. But the Ponca way of understanding is one of constant renewal of self. We were told that as we woke up in the mornings and made our morning prayers, every day, all the time throughout the day, but first in the morning, to understand that you can't pour water from an empty dipper. Have you heard this one, Gracie? Once, twice, 300 times? And so the very first thing that one must do every morning when you do get the honor of waking up is that you step outside yourself spiritually. That was our Ponca ways. Step outside yourself and you walk around yourself first. And as you walk around yourself in your mind's eye, you look at that body, you look at that spirit, you look at that mind, you look at that emotions, all the way around yourself. And as you walk around yourself, you see what you need. And we were taught the spirits are a kind and polite nation. They don't interfere with your being unless you ask for help. And so you ask for help at that time. I woke up asking for help from my companion. But first, I was taught that I have to ask for help for me. And I have to feed that portion of myself, mind, body, spirit, emotion, and become whole and fill my dipper so that when it's time to pour that water for someone else, that spiritual water, that emotional water, that thought, that way of being, that there's something there. That's the way I was taught. And once one walks around oneself, then you walk outside yourself and you walk around your loved ones this way, always in a clockwise, sunwise circle. And you walk around each one with the same intention. Then you walk around your nation, your peoples, and the peoples beyond, and the earth and her peoples, and whatever form that they take. But always remember that you can't pour water from an empty dipper, and that you have to begin with self in order to be able to give what you're supposed to give. And grandson had it honed that so well that he could do it in seconds. It was just a matter of understanding that thought and making it into a reality just this quick. And I invite you all right now to close your eyes. Just close your eyes. Everybody has a body right now, but inside that body is a spirit that is everlasting. It has no beginning, it has no end, but it has one of this body, this robe over it. So right now, right where you are, step outside of that body. You see it, you know it well. Step outside. Start walking very slowly. Look at that body. Look at it. Look at its arms, its legs, its feet, its head, its hair, its back, around, all the way around. Ask for help for that body. Ask for the blessings that belongs. Up, open the top of your head, the soles of your feet to the healing. And at the same time, now look at those injured portions of your spirit where you have believed someone's negativity. Where have you incorporated the stories of the boarding schools? I'm asking for help for a healing with the stories my mother told me. I'm asking for help for the thoughts that I had today that had any doubt involved in them. And I'm letting those go. My mind is healed. My spirit is healed of the pain. My thoughts, my body, my spirit, and now I look at my emotions. My emotions, when I was first born, was that of the love of my mother and the gratefulness of my being. I accept that feeling fully. And I finish that walk around myself and come back into this body. I'm light again. When I open my eyes, I'm here among you as a whole being. Yeah. Open your eyes, come home. Yeah. Yeah, that's how we heal. That's how we are taught to begin our day. And and I feel good. I feel good.
Good.
And just offer that little bit to you incredible women who are doing this work. And to remember that we're always those steps. We're the steps from the infants to those young girls, to you girls, to us elders, to the ones before and the ones that are coming. And I want to open the floor right now to any questions that any of you might have for these young ladies. And if none of you have your questions, then I got the one that I started with to you.
You want me to go first? What about your question?
Yes, please start with my question. My question was about those things that I've been hearing about, because I think that a lot of things wouldn't be possible for us to gather like with today unless we had that social media. And yet I hear about the things they call lateral violence, and I hear about the devastation that sometimes happens to our youth when they listen to that lateral violence, and ask you how you are helping us to utilize media the way you are and help our children that way.
Yeah, it's a big question. And I can only speak on behalf of myself. And so I think this digital sphere is like something we can't really see or touch in the same way, like being next to someone and being next to a relative. But I think like our teachings and our protocols like still need to be what we carry into that space, into that digital space. But as a Haudenosaunee woman, one of my core teachings, especially around the Great Law of Peace, is to be at peace myself. I have to be at peace myself to help facilitate that into the world. And an elder from Ganawage helped me realize what a good mind means. That's one of our, having a good mind, a good heart, and a strong fire. What a good mind means is knowing where your mind is going before it gets there. So I'll say that again. Having a good mind is knowing where your mind is going before it gets there. And that's something I'm always reminding myself in my own thoughts, because our thoughts have so much power, and then they get translated into our words, which carry that power either, right next to you in this physical sphere, but also into the digital sphere. We have to ensure that we're still upholding our responsibilities into the spaces that we can't see and that we can't touch, because there's still a energy transfer in the digital sphere that we have a responsibility. We have to uphold our responsibilities still. And so, but the thing is, with like social media, there is no like accountability or governance structure, right? It's self-accountability. And so, but that makes it harder, right? We don't have our elders necessarily saying, okay, it's time to like turn off TikTok, or like, this is how you carry yourself in that space. It's much like listening still in the physical world, listening to our elders, understanding those teachings, asking questions, and it's applying it in these other spaces that maybe we can't see or touch. And so it's continuing our ways of being and knowing into those spaces as well, and that we have to be self-accountable to that. And so, we have protocols in ceremony spaces, we have protocols and when we meet relatives in their homes, and so it's just like that. It's applying those protocols, and we go into those spaces, and we're not, I wouldn't show up in your home and say nasty things to you, and so I shouldn't do that online either, right? But that's a lot of self-accountability that we have to have. And because there is no like overarching accountability structure on social media, it starts and it ends with you, right? And so just taking those teachings and applying them everywhere that we go, including the spaces we can't see or touch. But that also means, when we're seeing people being violent to each other online, it's also calling them in. I like to reframe that, instead of calling people out, calling them in, right? And helping them understand, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. And so there's also that kind of accountability as relatives that we also have to hold in that shared space online. At least that's how I see it.
And I think also it's having like the concept of having protocols in all these spaces is having boundaries for self too, in going into these digital spaces and spheres of like, okay, am I spending too much time on social media? Like checking in with yourself. How is that affecting my mental health? How is that affecting my physical health? But also like checking in with your relatives too. You know, knowing and trying to be in tune and listen and understand how they're doing and how these different tools and platforms are also affecting them. So I'll check there.
Thank you. Do you recommend taking breaks from social
Oh, yeah.
media? Yes.
Yeah, I think it's also a practice to just be like really self-aware of how you're feeling physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And for me, that has been my practice is like, because I'm online all day for social media for work, I like barely post on my own page because I don't have the energy for it, right? Or I've noticed that like being on social media right before I go to bed, like what I saw is like, you know, going into my dreams and I'm thinking about that in my subconscious. And so it's having really good boundaries for self. Now that means something different for everyone, but I think having to like just be really self-aware and really honest with yourself, but also like having to normalize these conversations with each other of like, you know, how are you doing and how are you utilizing these tools and are you okay? Just like asking each other, are you okay? Because I think especially in the pandemic, we've had to physically isolate from each other and we've used this tool as a communication method to stay connected. But at the same time, like we've all been struggling in many ways, and sometimes we're also letting that struggle and that violence that's in our minds that we're struggling to come out of our mouths and into, you know, Facebook or any of these other platforms. And so we have to be a good relative in every space that we go to, even the ones that we can't see or touch.
I appreciate that. I see a question over here.
Actually, it's not a question, it's an encouragement to all of you. I heard my fellow Canadian talk about the tar sands in northern Alberta. If you haven't seen those pictures, I encourage you to get online and have a look at what has happened to that area. There, you can't get any roots, you can't get any of the medicines, it's gone. Will it ever be back? Who knows for sure. But it is completely devastated from what they've done up there. And I think that's something that we all need to keep in mind, that by ignoring or allowing them to continue, that's what it's going to look like all over. And it is something that I witnessed my whole life, and I didn't think anything of it until I came down here and started to really understand what they were doing. So please, if you've got a chance, go and see Slave Lake tar sands.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's like a direct reflection too. It's like, you know, oftentimes we do this organizing is like not in my backyard. So as long as it's not, you're not doing anything here, I'm good. And I find that's a lot with Indigenous people, like in Canada, you know, where I'm from, a lot of people are pro-resource extraction. You know, they really, really believe that economic development in this capitalist system is poverty alleviation. It's the way that we're gonna help our communities, you know, because we don't got nothing, right? The government has a responsibility, but that's very nil. So, you know, I think for myself, you know, it's not just about fighting the projects, but it's also like, what are we doing to actually rebuild economies in a way that suits our moral beliefs, right? Like, what are we doing to solve the problems in our communities? And to me, that's like things like just transition, but I also look at it as like, that's like birth work in Saskatchewan. We've had 2 babies born in our communities on the land, and we couldn't have Indigenous midwives. As of 10 years ago, it was illegal. So for those babies to be born, that to me is like, the greatest ceremony we have. It's the start of life. So to me, that's a way to fight those corporations. You know, as much as we fight, we need to be building stuff and regenerating things, right? And to me, that's like, it's also getting our communities out of this idea that we have to exist like the white people. We have to exist like Canada wants us to in these systems. But we also need to think about like, it's an incremental process, right? And that's where like, I really want to encourage young people, because that's where innovation and that creative artisticness, that we really need that, you know, grounded in our ceremonies, because that's what's going to save us. And I think it's exciting. I think what people are doing is really amazing, you know, and to see people like, you know, creating gardens in places like Palestine and these tiny things on walls, right, in war zones. It's amazing the things that we're able to do in the circumstances that we're in. So I just want to encourage people to think about that, because yes, it's really horrible, but at the same time, like, we knew we were winning against those big tar sands communities when they started hiring people that looked like us in their comms, right? And we're a tiny little group of us, maybe 10 of us, that were fighting it. So we know that we can win against these massive corporations. And again, it's not like we're going to shut it down tomorrow, but they know that there's someone that's always going to be there to fight back. And I think that's the thing that's important to me. And they're really amazing people up there. So I hope if like they have a healing walk, that you guys will come. It's intense, but it's also really beautiful. You know, we need each other.
Yeah, I really enjoy all that. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions, comments? If not, we're gonna let these ladies off of the hot spot.
Stop yawning for
We have 2 comments or questions over here. One.
So is there a podcast people might be able to tune in and listen to some of the things you talked about today? Let's say like somebody's at work and they can fill in their earbuds and listen to it, you know, some of the things that's been said here, and you know, educate themselves while they're still making money. And I think, because I've done that before, you know, I used to mow lawns and I just go in my headphones and listen to podcasts of people like yourself, you know, you stay informed.
I have a suggestion on that, if you don't mind, and then you guys throw it in there too. But I see everybody out here with cameras. I know Movement Rights has its own media. I see granddaughter Morgan is doing a media thing, and I know all of you have those that you have available. Why don't we at least, while we're here, get a list that we can get out to everyone that will give us the ability to, and when I say we, I don't mean me. One of you guys will take the job of just getting that all written out so that all of us have that same access. That's a fabulous idea. Yeah. Anyone else with an idea about that?
I know we actually have our own recording studio, and we've just started a process. We released our first podcast the end of last year, and we're starting the new podcast with elders, called Elders Speak. It's this new podcast. Last one was Future Generations was the title for. So, but I'll get all that information for y'all. It's on Twitch.
You guys set your organized all to
Yeah, I'll send some resources to Shannon, and maybe you can help distribute it out.
That's what I was asking her about Katie, is maybe we can get somebody to do a list, and if not, I'll grab, Gracie. There you are smiling at me. If you can help us organize, yourself or somebody who can get that list together so we can get copies of it out to everybody, I'd appreciate it. Do we have a sign-up sheet here? You probably do. I have a list. The registration list. Yeah. Does it have emails and stuff on it? Oh, see, the magic is already done. It takes a little detailing, Miss Gracie.
Where's the registration list? It's not public. I mean, we obviously don't want to share everybody's email without their permission. So, so what I'll do is I can send an email out to everybody, asking you to, if it's okay for us to share, and then we can do it that way.
Oh, you mean when we online register?
When you registered online,
okay.
I got all that information, but we don't share it with just anybody. We need your permission.
Was there another comment or question over that way? Over here? Over here?
I just wanna say it's amazing to see how the youth is moving forward and taking in the experiences and, looking forward to the next generation and how to bring about the healing and passing on the work. It's really makes me feel good to hear all that. And I've known Heather and her work, and it's really good to see her that she's developed and moved that direction, and to hear that the social media is, that there's components that somehow affect our youth and affect our work, So I just want to say thank you, guys.
Thank you, I agree. Tomorrow, I know that Heather has also taken on another task for us to do the nonviolent direct action training. And she has pulled me out of some hot spots. I know she's really good. Yes, so when they...
I just wanted to share with everyone the podcast that I'm a part of is called Failing to Save the Earth. And it's all in nonviolent direct action because there is a lot of confusion. Like, when is the time to get petitions out? When is the time to start knocking on politicians' doors? When is it time to start marching? When is it time to actually go into hardcore stuff such as lockdowns and we're working with our jewels and our tripods? When is the hard, soft, medium, when does it come in? And that's what I really love about Failing to Save the Earth podcast is that helps people navigate this discussion. And so there's 6 episodes up right now. They're being ongoing. Joy Braun was a part of it. Jules Richard, part of Mama's program, myself, and we're all from different regions in Turtle Island that contributed, and they answered hardcore questions on nonviolent direct action and helping people guide through it. So Failing to Save the Earth is the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully we'll get that down as well as one of the resources. And can we all just say thank you? Thank you. I'd stand up for you if I could. I just didn't. Thank you so much for everything that you brought. What's that?
Okay.
Hey, I don't think that's fair.
One little tidying up here with the program. Okay, so we're going to go into a few, just because this is not my area of work, but I do, because all campaigns, intersect and interweave, I do know a little bit about Indigenous just transition. How do we, the phase out of fossil fuels is coming. And that's when we get really frustrated hearing the MAGA voices who are saying it's not. I deal with our people around here who say, well, the military operates. The military operates on fossil fuels. What do you expect them to do? You think they're going to ride on electric vehicles? I hope not. But it's coming. And so how do we get our people through this? And you know, it's kind of what we were just talking about, changing society, how we look at, how we judge ourselves and how we measure success. Well, we've been doing it by their rules for 500 years and more. It's time to look back at our ways and take those ways back. And that's kind of what the basis of Indigenous just transition is. So, how do we transition through the phase out of fossil fuels? I know, Casey, we've had a million discussions over 35 years about the oil tribes in Oklahoma, and I remember in 2003, we had the workshop talking about tar sands the first time here, and kind of got in trouble. I remember Francis' reaction, because a lot of our people still, and especially elders, still live on leases from the oil fields. The thing is, you've got oil companies who are making 140 billion dollar profits. Mind blowing. And our relatives are thankful to get $500 a year, if that.
Right.
Maybe $500 over 5 years. It's, you know, just to let them to cross the land, and they think they're getting something for that. So, you know, it's, Casey and I have talked, we used to say, well, we can't really call out our relatives, we don't, you know, we don't want to make anybody mad in this process, but we're at a time when we don't really have a choice. I don't see that we have a choice, not if we want our children to carry on, and it's everyone's children. So I remember the ice storm we had here that went way down into Texas in February of 2021. I was shocked on social media to see so many younger people that I knew around these communities who usually don't say much about anything at all. They were really giving capitalism hell, you know, and saying, this is what happens. Things have to change. So I'm really encouraged by what young people are doing, their boldness. They're thinking along different terms than we did growing up. They have a new vision for the future, and I'm really encouraged by our young folks. I have some pamphlets about just transition. And I've just laid these around, Indigenous principles of just transition, and what's really cool about this is the artwork. So you've got some nice artwork here, and the principles of just Indigenous just transition on the back. Some of you have already picked them up and commented. So that's all I'm going to say on the topic. Our speaker, who was going to be here, actually she's IEN's first Indigenous just transition organizer. And there's a whole toolkit being developed that we'd like to get out to the tribes, because corporations, especially extractive industries, have taken over the government. The guys sitting in Congress are just their placeholders. That's why they stay in power. So we want people to understand that you know, change is coming, and we want our people to be prepared. That means what they're doing here in this camp, they're doing some examples of just transition. And when we first started talking to them, they don't hear those terminologies. So there are being toolkits developed that we hope to get out to the tribes, to organizations like this, who are already doing just transition projects. They're planting little gardens out here. They're trying to turn this whole campground into an ecological reserve. It's gonna take years, but these are projects that have been developed with our Eastern Band Cherokee relatives who were supposed to be here this weekend. But as we've too seen throughout Indian country around the extractive industry, violence that has come into our communities. People having to define success as having more things. So they go out and do things that we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be treating people that way, ourselves that way. I don't really know how much I should get into talking about. They had, should I just say that?
About what?
The death they had.
If we're doing more MNIW stuff tomorrow, then we'll hold for that.
Okay. They had a death in their family, and we'll talk more about that. So they're not here this weekend with us. And so I'm hand putting these out for those persons that were going to be with us. Y'all are welcome to pick up as many as we have out. And I appreciate y'all being here.
Does everyone have a clear idea of what just transitions is? If you do not, hold your hand up. Oh, Shannon.
Well, she said, we're also trying to save time too. And
let's just give one or two simple examples of just transitions. You know, if for instance in Detroit right now, where they're having all of the water issues with the pipes, the lead pipes, what if those same people who were being forced to do the slave work of the fossil fuel industry's pipelines, and it's the second most dangerous job on earth. We don't want those guys to go without being able to feed their families.
Right.
You know, there's an issue that goes with that. What if those same people were, with their skills as pipeline layers, as all of the things they are, were then transitioned in a just manner, just transition, into doing the same thing in Detroit to bring clean water to the people there, or in Louisiana, or something like that. And another quick example was Black Mesa Water Coalition, which is one of my favorite ones. They got that whole coal-fired generating plant shut down. Well, they went to court in Kansas City, these young women did, and they said, okay, these guys declared bankruptcy, and they're going to get a golden parachute, these people are, and they're going to walk away, these guys, the top dogs, with millions and millions and millions and millions. And down here, us Dene and the workers are just going to be out of luck. So let's flip that picture in a just transition, and let's have the people who are the most impacted get the most money. Those on the ground that are going to have to rebuild their lives. Those that are the workers who now don't have a place to go to work. We train them into solar energy. And those guys who want the golden parachute, just let them jump off. You know, that is a just transition in its simplest terms. Yeah.
Right, and it's, that is an argument they use against transitioning, is that you're going to be out of work and you're going to be out of, everybody's going to be out of work. So, and we could make some of these transitions. I can't remember how many billions of dollars. I mean, it was even more mind-boggling than the other figure I just talked about, the oil company profits, to these space ventures now that they're, you know, we talk about if we could just use some of that money here on our planet. You know, we've even got scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, if you can remake Mars for human habitat, remake the Earth. And industries to go with it so that people aren't out of work. And they could stop that argument, but it's the fear tactics. So some of the things that are talked about, it's like, there's other things that these corporations are trying to bring to the tribes that are only going to get us in trouble. And we really don't want to get into them at this point, but things like these carbon schemes where it's literally trading dirty air. But some of the tribes, they're out, they're shopping these ideas to the tribes. And again, it's that, the waving the big money in their face. We need to talk to our tribes about these things, about developing just industries that are fair to people, so that they can earn a fair living and still support their families. And we can transition into a new way of thinking, new industries for people. And I think it's coming, but there's a lot on here. Casey, I don't know that I could even see to start picking up. There's a lot on here.
I didn't bring my glasses,
but there's some really good information here. There's information here how to talk to your tribal representatives about these things. Taking back our cultural ways, our life ways. Taking things back, like renaming. We have the Eastern Band people who are working out in not North Carolina, the next state, Tennessee. Actually, it's Tennessee and North Carolina. Taking back Klingman's Dome, which was their sacred site. It's rolling along too to get that name changed. So that may not seem like a lot, but those are ways that we take back what's ours. And that is kind of the underlying principles of indigenous just transition. We had good ways. We were taught that they were bad, but that was their agenda. We know better, and we need to start moving that way. Not back, it's not really back. We're gonna move forward with it. So I'll have these lying around and y'all can please take some. And now I guess we'll move into the open mic.
Yeah.
Commentary.
Yeah, on any particular subject or just at large?
I think we talked about just open mic.
Yeah.
Commentary from.
We got someone over here.
Before we see over there, a question.
Stand up and talk loud.
So, in order to communicate that with our leaders, how could we create a system in our community where it ain't necessarily more dollars in our community, but more culture as an environment, and giving us those tribal lands open to gardening for the community and things like that? Are those some of the things strategies that you have going for your organization?
I think we're interesting right now. Let me experiment here just with this idea. Why don't you tell me, what is the vision that you have for your community? What do you want?
So I read a statement once that said poverty is the mother of all crime. And so what creates poverty is it, some people might say capitalism, or people capitalizing, and there's got to be rich, there's got to be poor. But where's the place where there ain't got to be rich or poor? It could be that community where we rely not on the money, but the economy of the earth, the trees, grass, water, air. Those things do good, we do good. But when the banks do bad, why do we have to do bad? So what I'm trying to think of is a way to get our leaders to build our identity back as indigenous people, to create that relationship with the land because we are the land, and to get a real, people are always like, they own the land. Who loves the land is what I'm asking, and those people should have a voice as well. And to be able to create a system where the youth and everybody can get involved
to where we don't have to worry about, you know, the stock market. You know, we're still fed, and that our, you know, gardens to be able to come up every spring and have a place to do that, teach the, you know, perhaps have schools that our tribes run rather than the state teaching us our way of life. Because growing up, that wasn't taught to me in a public school. I was taught to salute the flag and, you know, sing church songs at the, you know, during Christmas plays and things like that. But, you know, to think different, they look down upon you. But, you know, even going forward, I still a part of those communities that look down on those things, but I still see the poverty there is still really bad. And I just wondered what it'd be like if we all grew our own food and we all, you know, rather than living off the government commodities, you know, those high carbs. But to get the youth involved, that's the really challenge.
Yeah. So stay standing up. Because I want to first and foremost tell you, when you say, I want the leaders to know, I want the leaders to do, that I personally recognize you as a leader.
You have it.
I recognize you as the leader. You're the one with the ideas. You're the one with the youthful energy. You're the one that sees a way to innovate how your community can be. And then maybe I'll also give you a little understanding of when we were young, and Brother Carter and the others came home with ideas of AIM and about the educational system and on and on and on. It wasn't the tribal elected people who are mimicking the colonizers that had the answers or who were listening. It was us sitting at our mother's kitchen table, and we would talk to one another. We would listen. Carter, Craig, those that had the information about what things could be, like you're doing right now. And it would just be a little core of brothers and sisters and our kids running around, and mama kind of sitting and bossing and giving us, you know, our little jobs to feed and stuff. And from that table, then we would talk to the cousins, the neighbors, the ones in the community about that. And then at that point, it was all about direct actions. It was all about taking over the BIA in Pawnee, or, you know, doing something downtown Ponca City, or crashing those school board people until we took control of the school boards. But it all began right there with someone like yourself, who had the understanding of what needed to be, and began to share that little core with a smaller other core, and that just kept on expanding until it became. And that's what you can do. And
you can do it. I was sitting in a meeting at Pawpaw, and it was like they really weren't understanding. I was trying to tell them, you know, these things are coming. You're in positions of leadership. It's going to come to you. You'll hear it before the rest of the community will. You need to be aware of these things. And they didn't really. You can kind of tell when people are looking at you with their head like, yeah. And I said, you know, we've been taught, and we have lost a lot of our traditional ways, but I see so much of it there. I go into communities where I've heard, wow, they don't have anything left. It's, you know, they think this way, and yeah, there are the people who we in our communities who think like MAGA people. But there are also people who are still trying to keep our traditional ways together. And even the ones who don't know, I said, y'all, we have a powwow every year. Between us and Ponca, there's kind of like this ribbon that goes back and forth about who has the oldest powwow
Well, we know.
in the
but-
state. So, and I said, just think about it. We do things in a certain repetition. We dance in a certain way. And I've always been told by everybody up here that when that stops, that's when it's over. So science is telling us now things like quantum physics, but what they're talking about is string theory and these harmonics that are really talking about our things. They just have different terminology. They're talking about natural law. We know about those things. That's why we still do things in certain repetitions. We go certain ways and always in a circle, and in our dances and our ceremonies, there are certain elements we still use. So we still do have it. We've got to stop telling ourselves we don't.
You got it. You got it.
Yeah.
I could just add a little bit of something to that, because I'm like the next step generation down from and above you, so I'm kind of in the middle there. But one of the things that you said earlier was talking about, and Joe Kay has mentioned it, people, having things, and that's where it's important and stuff like that. But one of the things that I have noticed that they do on both sides of the table, you have to make something be valuable. So what is valuable in your community? What because they made gold valuable, and you can't make anything out of it really. It's soft, and it doesn't work as a tool, and all of that kind of stuff. But somebody said gold was valuable because it's rare. Somebody said diamonds and gems and these things were rare. I mean, we can make glass that looks just like them, and you can't tell the difference, right? But somebody made that have value. So you have to make water have value. You have to make clean soil have value. You have to make, what it is you're looking at be a valuable resource and appeal to the moral and ethical side of people's, of their thinking and stuff. Because in the end, most people, percentage-wise, don't want to be crap people. They just are stuck in the spot of living, right? So you have to have electricity, and you have to pay your rent. You got to be able to put gas in your car and buy groceries for your kids and all of that kind of stuff. So you get struggling with just living. So what are you going to be able to do that adds value to their struggle to help ease that a little bit? Could be a garden, a community garden is the first thing you're talking about. But I was listening to everybody talk about the American Indian movement a lot today, and I was there, and it's in early days and stuff, even though I don't really remember all of that. But I do remember hearing things about what people did, like my Uncle Carter, who went out across Oklahoma and went to people's homes and visited with them and told them what they were doing, and found out in every community there is someone who cares. In every town there is somebody who cares. It might be a farmer, could be a rancher, because they also were technically stewards of the land at one point as well. And they're actually teach classes to teach farmers how to go back and farm the way they used to manage soil conservation, to do riparian zones and stuff. But anyway, he went out, and when he was done, there was 37 AIM chapters across Oklahoma. So there was 37 communities out of, there's thousands of communities in Oklahoma, right? But 37 chapters, that's a lot. That's a lot of people that you got to at least come about the same awareness that, or the same thoughts, or we have the same things that we want to look at inside of our communities and inside of our families. And when I was coming over here and with my parents, I see all of you guys everywhere, the same people. And there's a core group of people that is at everything. They're the ones that when you put out a call to action, they show up. When you have a convening, they show up. When you have an honor, they show up. And so how are you going to bring in more people? I've never seen you before, so somebody did something, right? Got you to come here. We're in a different part of the state, and so there's different people that are here. And just to give you encouragement to keep doing, keep going, keep talking, keep listening, ask questions, stand up, and don't just come and then not look at it again, ever again or anything, because you do have the ability to do 37 chapters of whatever you want.
Yeah.
And we know
across
he
your
does.
territory.
We know he does.
David Hill's
That's David Hill's son.
one of the things that.
See, I don't recognize you. I recognize the other one.
You remember when he was about this big
Yeah,
of it?
probably.
Yeah. One of the things that's kind of helping with us among the Ponca there is that Wall Street Journal tells you that the fastest growing job market is in green energy. The fastest way to make money is to grow and sell organic food. I mean, that value that she's talking about, finding it and selling it to whoever is in that position that they can help turn that corner for you.
ExxonMobil's selling it right now on commercials on TV all the time about the grand cleanups that they're doing in places that they contaminated, right? So they're flipping the switch and they're saying, hey, we're part of the good guys.
Right.
We're doing the thing, but they're appealing to your sense of morality and goodness and stuff like that, and showing that you're doing, that they're doing something good. But that adds value back to their company again.
Yeah, our stupid tribe's putting in a gas station, but because we've continued to tell them about all of the money that's in the electric stations, because that's the next thing coming up, and because there's money in the federal government right now for just transitions, for doing these electric stations. We now have them doing a whole bunch of electric stations in their stupid gas station as well.
Which is Conoco branded, by the way.
Yeah, you heard my
Yeah, Conoco branded gas station. It also has Mazio's Pizza, though.
Not bad.
Ron Mancias, can you confirm that Texas is the #1 producer of oil energy, but also the #1 producer of wind energy? I believe that's,
No, it is.
yeah.
But
So,
anyway,
So that
So a transition is happening.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
it could happen faster and could be more widespread. They don't want you to know that.
So just use your brilliance that you already have.
Don't
right
doubt
there.
yourself.
Yeah, and let them know that they can still be successful in their terms while you are doing all this stuff to make all this success happen at a grassroots level.
Stop judging yourself by their standards.
Right. And I think I read somewhere where they're taking tobacco and creating fuel with that rather than,
Oh, there's all kinds of things happening. They're just not, it's like ours, it's not gonna make the news. There are all kinds of things happening.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, I was wondering what the tribe can, because they also have money, what they can invest in that will, bring the energy and, create more.
Well, those are two areas, the ones that we just told you. Solar energy, for instance, the majority of that is being produced overseas, and there's a very delicate balance because a lot of the resources that do the batteries are on indigenous lands and in sacred spots.
Right.
So there's all of this balancing that we have to do, but at the same time, it is the best growing industry. And if there's a way that we can do it honorably and we can get our tribes to say, oh, cash money, and at the same time we're accomplishing what we're trying to do, maybe getting an elder community to be able to not have a big electric bill to pay or something like that. There's ways, and you can discover really.
Elect people who think out of the box.
Divest.
You said investment a minute ago, but divestment is another thing that you want to encourage.
Are there, and we've got to move on to other open mic people because I smell food in there.
Joe Kate, do you want to also tell us about this evening, what's happening after dinner?
Okay, yeah, I'm glad there's people around to keep me in order. We've got some of our Cherokee traditional people have come from our ceremonial grounds. I'm gonna ask them to talk, we're still waiting on a few of them to come. But I wanted to ask them to talk a little bit about bringing, how the Cherokee people brought their ceremonial fires and kept them lit, their sacred fires, on the Trail of Tears. The Cherokee had 3 or 4 Trails of Tears. But I'll let them talk to you more about that. We're gonna build a fire, and I think we're gonna try to build some fires and some barrels out there so people can stay warm. They said they've done that at their ceremonial
What,
ground.
you think I get cold? Is that
We all ended up cold. So we'll have them explain some of that to you about the culture, and then we're gonna have a ceremonial dance. It's not exactly a sacred dance, so at a ceremonial ground, the women wear a certain shell they call turtle shells. So you might see some of those tonight. I'm not sure. They'll probably be what they use in modern times, made out of cans, rocks. But as far as I understand, everyone's welcome to join in, and when they dance, it's man, woman, man, woman.
Is there any restrictions on women who are at that time?
I was asked that yesterday. What I would tell, usually if it's not at the ceremonial ground with a sacred fire, where they've also taken medicine and things, no, a woman on her moon would not dance. Here, it's kind of just where you're at and who you talk to. I would tell my own daughters, no, don't dance. But I'll talk to them before we start, and they can explain it.
And as far as dinner goes, are we just gonna stay in the same area?
Yeah, we can still have dinner. We'll do it like we did lunch today, and I'm gonna go check on that.
All right. Is there anybody else who
Guys, I'm gonna end the live stream here. We're gonna
Anything you know
get
going
ready
on
to
in
start
your
dinner break,
communities, or-
work on dinner and whatever else, any fun activities here that we're doing
Local
here. So
issues.
I will check there and I'll
I'd just like to clarify one
start
thing,
live
guys,
streaming
because
again
someone said
tomorrow
there's no
around the same
photos of
times.
this